In one world, a demon who'd lived for half a millennium fought his final battle. After felling humans numbering in the thousands, he met his end not at the hands of a godlike opponent whose innate talents surpassed the moon-breathing techniques that had been forged over centuries, but rather the combined efforts of opponents both weak and strong, human and demon. He found no peace, experienced no comfort, and gained no deeper understanding of his purpose in life. When he was sent to hell to pay for his crimes, he was dragged clawing and resisting, never once accepting the fate he himself had orchestrated. But eventually, his fruitless efforts ceased. In one world, Kokushibo closed his eyes for the last time. And in another, Midoriya Izuku opens all 6 of them. From the moment he was born, the nurses said he was cursed. Though quirk mutations weren't a rarity in the world they lived in, never before had the doctors seen one quite as peculiar as Midoriya Izuku's. No one in the Midoriya family line could be considered a mutant, nor were they completely silent and still upon birth, and yet Izuku was both. At first, the doctors were concerned that something had gone wrong during the procedure and the baby had been stillborn. The list of reasons the baby could have died were endless, and ever since quirks entered the equation, no doctor could be certain of a newborn's safety during delivery. But when the attending doctors rushed to provide medical care to the newborn in the hopes that their life could be saved, they were met with 6 piercing eyes that stopped them in their tracks. Eyes that saw too far, moved too fast, knew too much. But worst of all was their color, blood red, and with chilling yellow irises. Mutation quirks weren't a rarity in today's world. Many of the country's top heroes bore quirks that drastically altered their physiology relative to a normal humans. And yet, for some reason, in that moment, those 3 pairs of eyes struck fear and despair into every person that met them, almost as though everyone in the room was present for the birth of a demon. Later that day, Midoriya Izuku's quirk was officially listed as 6 eyes. Where am I? Is this hell? Hell seems to be far brighter than I expected. No, I do not feel enough pain for this to be hell. Focus, look beyond what appears to be. See the truth for what it is. A white room, with healers? Have the demon hunter core taken my body for the sake of experimentation? Is that why my form feels incomplete? No, their bodies are not trained enough to be demon hunters, and why does that one's lungs have signs of burns? It is almost as though flames have been birthed from his breath. I see. It seems the times have changed. Sometime later, in an apartment in Mustafu, 2 friends met for tea. After listening to Inko's babbling for the better part of an hour, Mitsuki Bakugu puts down her cup. And he hasn't made any noise? She asks. Not even a whine. Hell, compared to mine, he's practically heaven in a blanket. Want to switch? Inko, for the first time since they sat down, looks up to meet her eyes. Mitsuki, please. 2M being serious. It's been weeks and I don't know what to DDO. Hisashi is doing some research on developmental disorders, but the doctors aren't really sure and well, too just. Inko, relax. The kid is going to be fine. And even if he never says a word, Katsuki's going to need someone who can balance his screaming out. Otherwise, both of our eardrums are going to be blown before his quirk even comes in. 2M, just worried is all. And none of the books I've read said anything about something like this happening. And in those eyes, she begins to tear up once again. Mitsuki flashed her a comforting smile. Personally, I think his eyes are the coolest things I've ever seen, but I get why you and Hisashi are a bit freaked out. I mean, neither of your families have histories of mutations, and none of their quirks come close to little Izuku's. But no matter what his quirk is, he's still your son. That's got to count for something, right? Inko stops crying just long enough to respond. I suppose so. I just hope he doesn't have trouble making friends. Children can be so cruel. As if Katsuki would ever let that happen. With the amount of trouble he's already giving me, I can't imagine what he'd do to a bunch of prejudiced brats. She laughs. Meanwhile, in a different room, Kokushibo was coming to terms with the new life he had been given as Midoriya Izuku. Though he was limited to the space of his crib, his mind wandered to the distant past and the confusing present. It appears that in this new world, blood demon techniques have become a normal aspect of human life and are known as quirks. Is it possible that Muzan-sama was able to overcome his weakness to the sun and proliferate his blood across all of Japan? If so, then he is likely still alive and can return me to my former glory as it stands. I have neither proficiency with the blade nor the strength and regeneration from demonhood. Izuku looked down at his arm. Flabby, short, and slow, it resembled nothing like the arm he had trained for over 400 years. My biology appears to be entirely human. None of my demonic abilities remain. Even my mark has vanished. Save for my eyes, my senses have also been dulled significantly. He puts down his arm. How many years has it been since I was this limited in functionality? His vision returns to the ceiling, looking for something to maintain his attention. Before Muzan-sama granted me demonhood, I was more than capable of defending myself, and yet here I am, more powerless than I've ever been before. It may be a long while yet before I can return to my prime. A frown appears on his face. It seems it will take some time before I am able to train with the same level of freedom that I had as a demon. Training will have to be limited to wooden swords, and practice cannot lead to the permanent injury of whatever opponent I face. If I draw too much attention from the authorities early in my training, it will be more difficult to perfect my techniques in the future. Suddenly, he came to a realization. The future? What do I want to do in the future? It was not something he had considered up until that moment. In my past life, my goals were simple: perfect my techniques and preserve them. My nature as a demon allowed me that luxury that humanity didn't. I thought that my strength was enough to sustain that lifestyle. However, those demon hunters proved me wrong. Those humans, whose skills, techniques, and abilities were far inferior to mine, managed to defeat me, a feat I never even thought possible, at least not after. The sudden image of a familiar face flashes through Izuku's mind. At the same time, his heart rate drastically increases. Enough. Reminiscing is pointless. Focus on the future. With nothing better to do than ponder his possible paths, Izuku lies in the crib until his mother collects him for feeding. His father returns home, his two parents pretend everything is fine, and all the while Izuku's mind was elsewhere. Eventually, after he's put to bed, he comes to a conclusion. For the time being, I need to gather information about my surroundings so I can better prepare to streamline my training regime. I won't be able to reach a fraction of my former skill with my current biology. However, I can become strong enough to pursue other avenues of ascension. After all, those demon hunters were mere humans, and they managed to surpass me. Izuku's thoughts returned to the demon hunters who successfully fell him. What error did I commit in that battle that led to my defeat? Certainly hubris. Had I eliminated the mist pillar and the half-demon as soon as the opportunity presented itself, I never would have been overwhelmed by their combined efforts. Pride has always been a flaw of mine. Perhaps in my pursuit of perfecting my forms I neglected to improve my character. A distant memory. An open field. We are not so great, you and I. We are but a small fragment in humanity's long history. A vein made itself visible on the infant's forehead. How could he say that? A voice hissed in Izuku's head. How could he be so calm at the idea of his efforts being surpassed? His very existence? Did he not value the gift he had been given? Or did he truly believe his worth to be inferior to that of a successor? A faint smile, eyes seeing a brighter tomorrow. One day the children of tomorrow will surpass us and climb to even further heights. Izuku closed his eyes. No, not inferior, not weaker. Yorichi believed that future generations would not only reach our levels, but surpass them. But how were you so sure, brother? Izuku's eyes closed in the darkness. What kind of future did you envision at that moment that made you smile so? A blood moon in the sky. Two brothers without bond meet for the last time. Both thinking the same thought. This is heart-wrenching, brother. But while one thought it with sincerity, the other thought it with disgust. A final goodbye. An unfinished duel. Hate. 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 Izuku woke up in a cold sweat, staring at an unfamiliar ceiling. Only after a few seconds did he realize that he was not standing in a field with a sword in his hands, but was instead lying in a crib, defenseless and alone. He wiped the sweat from his face to the best of his ability and returned to his slumber, too tired to notice the tears his fingers had felt. After his morning meal, Izuku was returned to his crib, allowing his thoughts to wander to his next steps. As it stands, my combat potential is far lower than it was in my previous life. If by some unfortunate circumstance I am truly unable to reclaim my former strength, then I cannot allow my techniques to fall into obscurity. Once again, his brother's words resound in Izuku's head. One day the children of tomorrow will surpass us and climb to even further heights. Izuku shuts his eyes in the vain hope that the action would halt his train of thought. When he realizes it wouldn't, he slowly opens his eyes. Perhaps there was truth to his words. With the variety of blood demon arts, or quirks, available today, surely some individual has the potential to succeed my breathing technique. Izuku's final memories as Kokushibo flash through his eyes. And there would be no harm in having that insurance in case I met a premature end. After a few more minutes, Izuku came to a conclusion. As unfortunate as it seems it is necessary for me to search for a worthy successor to the moon-breathing style. It will obviously be a lower priority than reclaiming my former strength, but still something to keep an eye out for nonetheless. Izuku's 3 pairs of eyes wandered to the window, where he could see the buildings that occupied the skies of the downtown Mustafu area. Putting that aside, how far in the future have I reincarnated? The scale of architecture today seems impossible compared to the Taisho period if the engineers behind the creation of these cities have progressed so far in caliber. I wonder how masters of the sword have refined their techniques in the hundreds of years of my absence. Izuku smiled as his eyes narrowed. It may even be that my techniques may find their equals in the swordsmen of the modern era. The prospect intrigues me. I wonder then, what tomorrow will bring. Disappointment. Izuku found himself in front of the television watching a special on tea ceremonies when his mother changed the channel to the news. Shown on the screen was a fight between a large man with a ridiculous smile and an even larger man with features of a shark, holding bags of money. "You see that, Izuku?" whispered Inko. "That's All Might. He's the #1 hero, and he protects everyone from danger with a smile. It's because of him that we can live our lives safely." The man on screen bore muscles that far surpassed any Izuku had seen, either in this life or his previous one. However, whether or not that was to be attributed to his work ethic or his quirk remained to be seen. Izuku was about to attempt to crawl to the remote to change the channel when he realized that a new term had been added to his vocabulary. A hero? Thoughts of swords flashed through his mind. Is the occupation somehow related to the Demon Slayer Corps? If that is truly the case, then the origin of these so-called quirks is becoming more mysterious by the second. Izuku did his best to present an inquisitive face to his mother, hoping to prod her into explaining more about the occupations of heroes. Inko smiled. Heroes are the protectors of the weak. They defeat dangerous villains who try to harm innocent people and save victims of disasters, no matter the cause. Izuku's attention returned to the screen. The news switched to a program featuring up-and-coming heroes and interviewed each of them, exploring their respective quirks and what their motivations were behind their heroic pursuits. I see. It seems that the appearance of these quirks led to a forced overhaul of the criminal justice system, leading to a profession with a status akin to an idol. Judging by this woman's reaction, heroes are universally beloved by the common folk for their role as a bulwark of the weak. Izuku couldn't help but compare them to the demon slayers of old. If these so-called heroes are descendants of the Demon Slayer Corps, then I cannot help but be disappointed. The slayers I knew were joined by a united desire to protect the innocent and destroy the demons. They rarely received acknowledgement of their deeds, and fewer still received them when they were alive. And yet, these heroes relish in the attention and status that the mere title of an occupation can bring. Izuku's expression returned to a grimace. If these are the caliber of combatants of this era, then finding a worthy successor will be a tedious endeavor indeed. A few weeks later, after Inko and Hisashi had fallen asleep, Izuku climbed over the railing of his crib and made his way to the phone in his mother's purse. From there, he inputted the password he had seen her use dozens of times and started to familiarize himself with the digital apparatus. The surface responds to the touch of my fingers and responds in accordance with my input. Perhaps with this, I can find a library that can inform me more of the circumstances of this new world. When Izuku searched for the location of a nearby library, he was surprised to find the resource known as myheroacademia, which featured a greater range of information than Izuku had seen in the entirety of his previous life. Is this the result of someone's quirk? How do so many pages of a book fit into such a small device? He searched the site for any hint of Musen's existence or history of the demon slayers. After a few minutes, he leaned back. Nothing, even though the Demon Slayer Corps were an organization unrecognized by the government. I'm still surprised to see not even a single rumor of their existence. And Musen-sama doesn't seem to be a prominent enough figure to exist in this database either, if he exists at all. Izuku continued to search the site for mentions of breathing techniques, known demons, familiar names, and still found nothing. And for the first time since his reincarnation, Izuku was starting to doubt his understanding of the world around him. Why do no records exist of the Japan I knew? That could only happen if either a massive purge of historical knowledge occurred at some point in time, or if I was reincarnated in a completely different world than the one of old. Izuku changed his focus to finding the history behind the emergence of quirks. According to the website, quirks first appeared when a glowing baby was born in China, after which multiple variations of these new quirks started appearing all over the world. It is unlikely that Musen-sama is behind a development like this. He held no greater ambition for power or control beyond his own survival, and exposing his existence in such a haphazard way would have yielded him no benefits. He exited the tab and started crawling back towards his crib. If neither Musen nor the Demon Slayer Corps ever existed, then it is unlikely that this world is the future of my old one. Izuku's face slowly twisted into a smile. If this world truly has no connections to my original one, then I have neither connections or reservations to hold me back. He climbs over the railing of his crib. This world is filled with unlimited potential. Pulls the blanket over his body. All for me to conquer. Takes a deep breath. To surpass. And sleeps. As unsettling as Izuku appeared to be to all who knew him, they couldn't deny his status as a prodigy. Instead of babbling noises after 2 years, Izuku was silent for 3, and all of a sudden started speaking in complete sentences. Inko was so surprised that she considered bringing him to the doctor for an examination, but Hisashi talked her out of it. Instead of crawling, then walking, then running, Izuku was found examining one of the kitchen knives 4 feet off the ground on the counter in the middle of the night when he was 2. From that night on, he needed no assistance in getting around the house. In truth, he had learned to walk after 15 months, but simply kept it a secret to maintain his freedom around the house at night. Instead of reading the mountain of picture books Inko and her friends had gotten for him, Izuku spent hours on the computer, scouring the internet for information on sword styles, quirks, and history. Though Inko and Hisashi were proud of their son, they couldn't help but feel as though his expedited development wasn't a result of his upbringing, but rather of his nature. A nature that baffled all who met him, as it didn't remotely resemble the timid demureness of Inko nor the charismatic charm of Hisashi. Inevitably, this led to a rumor circulating among the local housewives as to the true identity of Izuku's father. This eventually reached Hisashi's ears, and as a result, he started distancing himself from Izuku, spending more time at work and sometimes not coming home at all. But none of this bothered Izuku. He was too invested in absorbing the knowledge of the modern era and preparing for the day that his training could finally begin. It was the middle of the night. Both Inko and Hisashi were asleep. He disconnected the nanny camera that had been monitoring him, and Izuku was ready. The time had come to introduce his new body to total concentration breathing. The action he had been practicing without thought for over 400 years now seemed like an impossible task, but Izuku was nothing if not patient. Though his lungs were small and his body weak, he was certain that he could achieve total concentration breathing for at least a short period of time by the month's end. If I am to push my body to its limits enough to make full use of my moon breathing technique, it is necessary for me to start training total concentration breathing as soon as possible. Izuku relaxed his body as much as possible and slowed his breathing to be as relaxed as possible. Finally, he exhaled all of the air out of his lungs. So it begins. And inhaled. It was a good thing Izuku had the foresight to unplug the nanny device, Otherwise, his mother and father would have surely been awoken by his hacking and heaving. As it turned out, infant lungs are not well suited to be expanded well past their limits, so it was extremely fortunate that he relented when his body began to give. Gasping, sweating, and shaking, Izuku struggled to return his breathing to normal. After enough time had passed, he returned to staring at the ceiling in the hopes something on it could distract himself from the reality he found himself in. So this is what pain feels like. It has been so long since I felt myself truly pushed to the limit that I forgot how difficult it was to actually struggle. Izuku closed his eyes and prayed they would open again in the morning. Though his first attempt had largely been a failure, Izuku understood that the strength he sought would not come in a day. Though his mind could envision the potential he had, his body was a bit slower to understand. Thus, his training had to progress very slowly. Every night, Izuku pushed the limits of his breathing a little further, a little longer. Though he was by no means capable of combat, he was already surpassing his contemporaries in physical abilities, being able to run, climb, and jump faster and stronger than anyone else's age. Despite his advantages, Izuku never once slacked on his training, taking every free moment to get a little closer to his goals. On his first day of school, Izuku was practicing total concentration breathing during recess when he heard particularly loud steps come closer behind him. He turned his head to find a blonde, spiky-haired boy around his age with 2 followers behind him. As soon as he met their eyes, the followers flinched, while the supposed leader returned the glare. Upon closer observation, Izuku noticed that the blonde one's sweat particles were composed of a different compound compared to a normal human's, eliciting the interest of the former demon. "Hey, you're Auntie Inko's kid, aren't ya?" Izuku simply stared back. "Mom wants me to take you under my wing. I'm Katsuki Bakugu, and I'm gonna be a hero." He shined a grin at the cross-legged Izuku. Izuku returned to his training. "Hey, I'm talking to you. Are you deaf or something?" Bakugu's face is twisted into a sneer. "I have no reason to interact with you or your peers. Do not interrupt my training again." "Training? You want to become a hero too? How the hell are you going to do that with a weak-ass quirk like yours?" He laughed. Izuku didn't even bother gracing him with a response. "What? Nothing to say? Doesn't matter, because no matter how much you train, you're never going to be stronger enough to beat me." His 2 lackeys assented. "Yeah, freak. Bakuga's the best." Izuku slowly opened his eyes and considered his options. Ignoring the boasts and jeers of children would be easy in this situation. However, if I do nothing but express passivity, they will likely take it as a sign of weakness and continue to harass me in the future. A few seconds passed. "Yeah, that's what I thought, you little." "Very well." Izuku suddenly stood up. "If you truly are superior to me, then you will have no trouble in bringing me to kneel, correct?" A maniacal grin spread across Bakugu's face. "Well, duh. If you don't think so, why don't you find out?" As if to punctuate, sparks flickered from the palms of his hands. "I see his sweat is composed of nitroglycerin. According to Mypedia, it is used to treat heart conditions, but when ignited creates explosions." Bakugu took long strides towards Izuku before suddenly winding up for a right hook, right before receiving a swift jab to the throat. HRGH, and sank to his knees. Bakugu, Katsuku, both of his lackeys looked shocked, but did nothing to intervene. Even though Bakugu was incapacitated and his lackeys were horrified, Izuku could feel nothing but disappointment. According to his muscle composition, he should not have fallen so easily after a single strike. Perhaps humans are even more fragile now than I remember. However, after a few seconds, Bakugu started to rise again. "You freak," he hissed out. "Are you trying to kill me?" "No." Izuku looked away as though the child was incapable of holding his attention. "I was simply appraising your strength. Unfortunately, you have failed to reach my expectations. Now leave me be." He started to walk away. Bakugu suddenly fired off an explosion directed behind him and dashed towards Izuku's back, determined to pay him back double for his first attack. Reaching for the back of his head, Bakugu smirked, knowing he was milliseconds away from his first heroic act, blowing the head off of a murderous villain. At least, that's what he was thinking before he felt someone grab his hand and twist it around before it exploded into his face. Coughing and blinded, he had no way to defend himself when Izuku landed a second punch into his throat. except this time it carried strength, not speed. You villain. Get him. Finally breaking out of their stupor, Bakugu's followers joined the fight in the hopes that it would even the odds. It didn't. Mrs. Midoriya, you need to understand that the level of violence that happened today wasn't normal. Children do get into occasional scraps, but they do not break bones or punch throats. They pull hair, maybe throw a toy or two. To be frank, you're lucky that the parents of the other children aren't pressing charges. Inko was barely holding herself together. To understand, sir, but I just don't know how this happened. Surely they must have provoked little Izuku into attacking them. To mean he's usually so quiet. I can assure you that nothing those children could have said would have justified the level of violence inflicted upon them by your son. I highly suggest scheduling him some sort of therapy to get his emotions under control. I'd hate to have a villain originate from our fine establishment. Yes, sir. Later that night, Izuku heard yelling coming from down the hall, then pleading, then the sound of the front door slamming, and finally sobbing. He returned his focus to his training. Time seemed to pass more quickly after that. Months turned to years, and Izuku's small body started to grow taller and fuller, with muscles that started to match his unnatural physical abilities. Even though he was top of his class in his first year of middle school, he was alienated by his classmates. Some remembered the violence he inflicted on his classmates on his first day of school, while others found his aloof personality intimidating. However, everyone was unsettled by his 6 blood-red eyes and the feelings of fear staring into them could induce. Though he was rarely physically confronted by his classmates, Izuku was frequently verbally harassed, most often by Bakugo. He saw fit to give Izuku the nickname Deku because of the seemingly useless nature of his quirk. Despite the impression he gave, Bakugo always remembered the day they first met and never forgave Izuku for beating and humiliating him. Izuku did not care, however, because he had found the perfect place to both hide from the prying eyes of others and perfect his techniques. Dagoba Beach, once a tourist attraction for its scenic sunsets and rolling waves, was now a dumping ground for most of the greater Mustafu area. A perfect place for a swordsman to perfect his skills. Unfortunately, the one thing that this swordsman lacked was a sword. Fortunately, he was about to get one. Izuku had been practicing his breathing long into the evening and found that the sky had turned dark while he was training. Though he had no issue with ignoring the darkness due to his eyesight, he was well aware of the likelihood of his mother phoning the police if he didn't return home in a timely manner. And so, he decided to take a shortcut by cutting through one of the seedier parts of town. It was during this journey home that the sounds of a dispute reached his ears. Listen, man, just take what you want. I don't want any trouble. Bullshit. I know you're holding out on me. Where the fuck is the rest of it? Izuku slowed his steps and started walking towards the direction of the noises. Don't know what to tell you. What you see is what I got. Listen, you little shit. If you don't say something I like in the next few seconds, you're not walking out of this alley alive. Turning the corner, Izuku saw one man towering over another. The larger man had no weapons on him, but his quirk seemed to make his hands resemble brass knuckles. The smaller man, however, had an assortment of guns, knives, pepper spray, swords, and a katana. Izuku felt his heart rate accelerate. In all of the time he'd lived in this world, not once had he found a way to acquire a katana. For the past 13 years, he'd felt as though he was missing a part of his body. And now the opportunity came to rectify that. Excuse me. The larger man turned around. A brat? What the fuck do you want? Izuku slowly walked down the alleyway. I was wondering if that katana there was available for purchase. Get the fuck out of here. This ain't none of your business. Izuku continued walking towards them. Are you deaf? I said get the fuck out of here, or else. A swift kick to the side of the knee interrupted his threat and lowered his head enough to be within Izuku's striking range. Total concentration breathing, followed up by a right hook to the jaw. The large man tumbled over. HRGH, a low groan escaped from the man crawling on the ground. Izuku stared down at his opponent in dismay. Even with total concentration breathing, I still lack the strength to knock a full-grown man out with a single punch. He looked towards the man carrying the weapons. At least now pure strength won't be necessary to incapacitate my enemies. You little fucking brat, Do you have any idea? Izuku silenced him with a kick to his left temple, instantly knocking him out. Don't hurt me. The other man cowered behind a dumpster. Izuku stopped in front of him. I'm not going to hurt you. You are a purveyor of goods, no? How much would that katana? Just take it. Take it, and leave me alone. Dropping all of his wares and stumbling to his feet, the man scurried into the darkness before Izuku could protest. How unprofessional. Not only has honor died out in this world, but apparently manners have as well. He picked up the katana and removed it from its sheath to appraise it. It appears it is not composed of 100% steel. Many impurities mar its surface, its craftsmanship is shoddy, and the length of the blade is too long for my body. He returned it to its sheath with a click. But it will do for now. Exiting the alleyway, Izuku left the body of the unconscious man along with the rest of the other weapons. And under the cover of darkness, Izuku returned to his home. Inko sat by two cold bowls of katsudon. Where is he? He never comes home this late. She stared at the clock. It was 9:20. She struggled to control her breathing. Should I call the police? What would I tell them? Isn't there a minimum amount of time that needs to pass before I can file a missing persons report? What should I do? What should I do? What should I? The front door opened with a click. Inko stood up with a start. Izuku? Is that you, honey? She rushed towards the entryway. Izuku stood there holding something wrapped in cloth. Oh, good evening, mother. When he started to walk past her, Inko stopped him. Izuku, where have you been? It's past 9 o'clock. Did you get in trouble? Were you attacked? Did. I am fine, mother. I was simply preoccupied. Izuku started to walk past her again. Wait, preoccupied with what? And what are you holding in your hands? He gestured towards the long object in his hands. Ah, this was a gift from a friend. I'll be making good use of it soon. He reached the door to his room. Inko tried to stop him again. Well, what about dinner? I made katsudon. You like katsudon, don't you? Izuku didn't even look at her when he started to close his door. Not particularly. It shut in her face. Inko stood in front of her son's door for a few minutes before returning to the kitchen. She put away the food, cleaned the dishes, and returned to her room before crying herself to sleep. Unfortunately, openly carrying a katana was more frowned upon in this world than his previous one, so Izuku had to make do by concealing it in a guitar case and carrying it wherever he went. It was bulky and cumbersome, but it was better than walking around without it. Making his way to Dagoba Beach, Izuku was elated at the prospect of finally being able to practice his forms once more. It has been 13 years since I last unleashed my techniques. Though they will not be as powerful as in my prime, I still hunger to feel them once more. Arriving at the squalid beach, Izuku reached his training ground, a wide area surrounded by towers of broken appliances, abandoned vehicles, and other trash. Here he could unleash his techniques without fear of observation or interference, and with plenty of materials to work with he could do so on a multitude of targets. Let's start with something familiar. Izuku turned towards a rusted refrigerator. That will serve as a suitable target. Taking the katana out from his case and placing it at his side, Izuku positioned his right leg slightly behind him and bent his knees. Relaxing his body, he let his attention focus on the target in front of him. Moon breathing, first form. He tensed the muscles in the arm, pulling his sword from its sheath. Dark moon, evening palace. A flash of light, a whistle of air, and a single horizontal cleave sliced the refrigerator in two. A satisfied smile spread across Izuku's face. Oh, how I've missed this. After a year of training with his new sword and body, Izuku had learned two things. Firstly, due to his lack of demonic abilities, he no longer had access to his blood demon art crescent moon blades. Because of that, his effective range in combat was severely reduced, and he could no longer rely on his crescent blades to dispatch large groups of enemies. Secondly, he couldn't use any of his breathing forms after 6, as without his sword's altered form he had neither the range nor strength to perform them. Save for his eyes, Izuku was no different than a pillar of the Demon Slayer Corps, and though that alone would likely be enough for him to defend himself, Izuku sought to reach greater heights. For now, however, he would have to make do. And though his training had been coming along swimmingly, he had yet to find someone worthy enough to succeed his techniques. All who he had encountered at Aldera Middle School save for Bakugu wouldn't even have survived the final selection, let alone eventually surpass him in skill. Izuku was a big fish in a small pond, and it was time he moved to bigger waters. Now class, I want you all to think very carefully about your high school of choice. This will influence the rest of your life, so make sure you take all of these factors under consideration. The teacher tapped on the blackboard before returning to his desk. As soon as he did, the classroom erupted in conversations about which schools were the best to choose. During all of this, Izuku was in the middle of trying to think of a way to substitute his lack of demonic abilities. Without my crescent moon blades, I'm left at a significant disadvantage in a long-range fight. My only options are to either carry a weapon that will allow me to fight at longer distances or make use of breathing styles that can shorten distances faster than moon breathing can. The only ranged weapon I could use that wouldn't noticeably slow me down would be a kunai, but the amount of damage I would inflict would be minimal. I could try to learn breathing styles such as thunder or wind breathing, but I've tried that when I was a demon, and the only breathing style that I could use other than moon breathing was water breathing, which doesn't specialize in speed. What to do? At this point, Izuku had long since learned to use total concentration throughout the day and had tuned out whatever noise happened around him. But upon noticing the future career form in front of him, he realized that he should at least put some school down for the sake of the assignment. Right when he picked up his pen, he heard an interesting conversation closer to the front of the class. "Whoa, Bakugu, you're applying to UA? Don't they have a crazy low acceptance rate? That's the top hero school in the country. Are you sure you can get in?" A variety of voices clamored. Bakuga laughed. "Well, duh. UA is for the best of the best, aka me and me alone. I'm the only one from this shitty school getting in, so don't get any funny ideas." The best of the best, Izuku thought back to his goal of gaining a worthy successor. All throughout this life, his contemporaries only failed to impress, and pro-heroes only succeeded in disgusting him. It had become obvious that if he was going to gain a worthy successor, he was going to have to train one himself. Unfortunately, talent like that is a rarity, and pursuing a normal occupation would only distance him from the caliber of individuals he sought. His best option would be to seek out potential successors at a hero school. On top of that, a school specializing in training heroes could teach him much about his potential enemies for when he inevitably met them on the battlefield, though that day was likely still some years away. Looking down at his paper, Izuku made his decision and wrote down UA as his first choice. 3 minutes after the bell had rung, the homeroom teacher walked into the unruly classroom. "Well, class, I'll be handing out your future life course forms." The class sat to attention. "But who am I kidding? You all want to be heroes." Before exploding into cheers, Izuku, on the other hand, did his best to tune out the noise. A loud bang coming from Bakugu placing his shoes on the desk cut through the celebrations. "Hey teach, don't lump me in with the rest of these losers." The rest of the classroom erupted in dissent. "Get off your high horse, Bakugo. What? You think you're better than us? Why don't you come over here and say that to my face?" Bakugu slammed his feet on the desk once more. "Oh, shut up already, you damn rabble. I'm going to be the #1 hero, even better than goddamn All Might. It's only natural that I'd get into UA." The teacher's face changed to a slight grin. "Oh, that's right. It looks like Midoriya also wants to go to UA." In stark contrast to Bakugu's proclamation, silence reigned over the classroom. "Midoriya? Seriously? I thought he'd be the last person to try for UA. What can he even do? He's kinda scary." The person in question was ignoring the whispering around him and reading a book on quirk science. One voice exploded over the others. "DKU." Bakuga stamped over to Midoriya's desk. "What the fuck do you think you're doing, huh? You think your weak-ass quirk holds a candle to mine? Where do you get off trying to place yourself on my level?" After a few seconds, Izuku slowly raised his 6 eyes to meet Bakugu's, and as soon as he did, Bakugu reflexively tilted his head down to protect his throat. And then, he returned to reading his book. "You little piece of shit," Bakugu sneered before raising his sparking right hand. Now, quirk use isn't allowed in the classroom. Bakugu, return to your seat." The teacher interrupted before their fight could escalate. Bakuga scoffed and started walking back to his desk. "This isn't over, Deku. he says under his breath. Izuku didn't even look up. After evading Bakugo and his lackeys at school, Izuku started to make his way home. That Bakugo, though his reflexes are good and his body strong, his mindset leaves much to be desired. His pursuit of strength is entirely reliant on his identity as a hero, and as long as that remains the case, he will never become my successor. Passing around a corner, he made his way towards an underpass. Not that I have any particular desire to train him. His default response towards any challenge is anger, and uncontrolled anger does not bode well for the moon-breathing style. Izuku passed over a manhole. Control over the mind needs to come before control over the body, after all. It seems finding a worthy successor remains a distant goal. Suddenly, he heard a rumbling noise from behind him and turned to see a giant blob of slime with 2 eyes approaching him. "Well, looky here, a medium-sized disguise. You'll do nicely." The monstrosity grew in size as it towered over him. Izuku narrowed his eyes, unclasped the latch on his guitar case, and moved. Crap, crap, crap. The slime villain couldn't possibly have gone far, but navigating these sewers was making this capture harder than it should be. And right when I'm about to go past my time limit too, I was just supposed to get some groceries, damn it. All of a sudden, he heard the sounds of a struggle directly above him. That must be the villain. Preparing for his dramatic entry, All Might punched the cover right off the manhole and jumped into the light of day. "Never fear, I am," and was met with an unsettling sight. A boy no older than 14 was standing with his back to him, facing down a trembling pile of slime, one significantly smaller than the villain All Might had originally been chasing. There was mucus covering the walls, and deep gashes littered the concrete in the surrounding area. Clearly, there was a struggle here. Did another hero neutralize the villain before I arrived? If that's the case, where did they go? With no one else in sight, he decided to ask the boy before him. "Excuse me, young man, but did you perhaps see another hero stop this villain?" The boy didn't respond. All Might reached out to him. "Young man." Before his hand could touch the boy's shoulder, he turned around and All Might froze. His eyes. Gods, what is with this kid's eyes? It's like they're staring right into my soul. And why does he have 6 of them? A moment passed. The boy tilted his head. "You seem familiar. Are you a hero of some kind?" All Might shook out of his stupor. "Well, but of course. The #1 hero, All Might, at your service. I was chasing this rogue villain when he escaped into the sewers in an attempt to evade me. I trust you're not injured?" He shook his head. "I was merely passing through. I came upon this scene entirely by coincidence." All Might laughed. "Thank goodness. Not to worry, citizen. I shall swiftly apprehend the villain." With that, he scooped up the trembling remains of the villain and placed them inside an empty plastic bottle. Once the living slime had been secured, he turned to make his escape before his time ran out. He was already pushing it as it was. "And with that, I'll be off." Bending his legs, All Might prepared to jump to the police station. "Farewell, young. How did you get that injury?" Suddenly, one of his closest guarded secrets was exposed. All Might violently coughed, blood spurting out his mouth. What are you talking about?" he said, feigning ignorance. However, on the inside his mind was racing. How did he see it? I'm sure it was hidden from view. Does it have something to do with his eyes? Is that his quirk? Despite witnessing the #1 hero cough up a concerning amount of blood right in front of him, the boy showed no emotion on his face. That injury, whatever attack that caused it, destroyed one of your lungs, a kidney, and most of your digestive system. I was simply curious as to what could have caused that degree of damage." All Might stared at him in bewilderment and thought a single word. "Shit." Before he exploded in smoke. Before Izuku stood a skeleton of a man who, despite wearing the same clothes that All Might had, couldn't have looked more different. "I see, so that's why his muscles were so tense before. And why he was in such a rush to leave." He continued explaining All Might's behavior in his head while waiting for the smoke to fully clear. When it finally did, All Might narrowed his eyes. "You don't look surprised." Izuku nodded. "Your weakness was apparent through the facade, though I suspect most people would be fooled." "Unfortunately, that's the idea." All Might sighed. As long as he could appear to be healthy and fully functioning, he would have to. A beat of silence passed. So how did you come to be in such a weakened state? All Might, realizing there was no point in hiding the truth further, lifted his shirt to reveal the massive scar tissue that made up his left side. Even professionals who witnessed it grimaced at its exposure, but for some reason the schoolboy didn't so much as flinch. I got this wound from a villain 5 years ago. As you said, it destroyed a lung, a kidney, my stomach, and damaged a few other organs. And as a result, I am only capable of working as a hero for about 3 hours a day. Izuku nodded. I see, and is that villain still alive? Thankfully, no. In our final battle, I stopped him from hurting anyone else permanently. Though he was able to reduce me to this state, as the symbol of peace, I must never falter to the forces of evil and always save innocence with a smile. All Might started to walk away, and it is for that reason that I must ask you to never speak of what you saw here today, not even to your friends or family. Izuku slung his guitar case over his shoulder. I have no interest in the affairs of heroes or villains. If anyone discovers your secret, it will not be through me. All Might gave a final, thankful nod before departing with the villain in custody. On the other side of the underpass, Izuku started to make his way home, thankful for the peace and quiet. So that's the #1 hero. He's rather imperceptive. Thinking back to the moment where he heard All Might arrive, Izuku realized how close his status as a combatant had been to being discovered. Thankfully, he'd been so preoccupied with the villain that he hadn't noticed Izuku slipping his katana back in his guitar case. But nevertheless, he needed to practice more caution in the future. Well, it all ended well enough. Izuku left the darkness of the underpass and stepped into the light. There was one thing that bothered him, however. Why does the strongest hero in Japan have the extra toe joint indicative of quirklessness? That fucking Deku. Walking down the street in front of his 2 lackeys, Bakugo seethed over the freak that had haunted him all of his life. Who the fuck does he think he is? Trying to steal my spotlight, when he's nothing more than a fucking villain. People say first impressions are the ones that stick, and the first impression Bakugo had of Izuku was the feeling of the freak's fist crushing his windpipe. What kind of a preschooler does that? A villainous one. That's kind that should never be allowed to walk the streets, and definitely never walk the halls of UA, a school for heroes. And yet, Izuku was trying to go to UA. And a small part of Bakugo was worried he'd get in. What the fuck is his game? Is he applying just to piss me off? Or maybe he's a plant sent by villains. To Bakugo, Izuku had always been hard to read. Though he'd known him basically his entire life, he could never stare at his face long enough to try to understand what he was thinking. Whenever he does, he's always met with one of the 6 objects of nightmare that haunted his dreams at night. His eyes. No matter how strong he became, how fast he ran, or how loud he shouted, those eyes always seemed to see right through him. And it's not like he was scared of them. No way that Bakugo, the future #1 hero, was scared of some stupid eyes. They were just fucking creepy. Yeah, that's it. They creeped him out like they creeped everyone else out. It's the eyes' fault Bakugo can't get a read on the freak, not his. It's not his fault that his actions seemed so incomprehensible. It's Deku's. Bakugo didn't know why Deku was the way he was. All Bakugo knew for sure was that there was no way in hell that he was going to UA to be a hero. After smelling cigarette smoke, he turned to one of his lackeys. Hey, what did I tell you about smoking? I don't want to get in trouble for your fuck-ups. Instead of seeing him chuckle nervously and comply like he usually does, Bakugo saw him drop the cigarette with a look of fear on his face. Suddenly a voice came from behind. A skin suit, hopefully you'll be easier than the last one. All of a sudden he couldn't breathe. A few miles away, Izuku was considering his options for successors on his walk home. It will be another 10 months before the entrance exam to UA. Until then, I won't have any other candidates for succession besides Bakugo. I've scoured the local gangs and dojos of Mustafu, but no one I found has the kind of innate talent worth cultivating. Walking on the sidewalk, he couldn't help but lament the state of the martial arts and swordsmanship in this new world. Everywhere I look, I see an over-reliance on these quirks. They neglect physical training, develop no techniques, and prioritize frivolous showmanship over combat practicality. But they will see. Thinking of the thousands of swordsmen he had felled in his previous life, Izuku narrowed his eyes. One day they will see that their way of life is not strong enough to defend their society against those capable of destroying it. A few moments later, he heard an explosion coming from the shopping district. Though at first he had simply elected to ignore it, more explosions soon followed. A series of explosions, not a gas main or a single bomb. They're panicked, seemingly at random, and at varying sizes and intensities. Likely the result of a quirk. More specifically, Bakuga's quirk. Izuku started making his way towards the explosions. Upon reaching the shopping district, he came upon a chaotic scene. Bakugo had been almost entirely covered by the slime villain Izuku had neutralized earlier, and in his panic was releasing random explosions in a desperate attempt to free himself. The resulting explosions had destroyed the fronts of surrounding buildings and ignited more than a few fires. It seems that the villain was able to escape custody. Apparently, All Might is both imperceptive and incompetent. Heroes had arrived at the scene and were trying to contain the situation, putting out fires and holding back civilians who had come to spectate the chaos as though it were a show. Why aren't the heroes doing anything? Isn't All Might supposed to show up? When is the action going to start? At this rate, I'm going to be late. Disgusting. Izuku couldn't help the disdain from showing on his face. Who do these weaklings think they are? What right do they hold to speak of haste? Further down the street, heroes were observing the villain, trying to find a weakness to exploit in order to rescue the hostage. At least, that's what Izuku had assumed they were doing, but pushing through the crowd and listening closer revealed otherwise. None of us have the right quirk to deal with this. There aren't enough lanes for me to get through. We've got to wait for someone with a more advantageous quirk. I feel sorry for the kid, but he'll just have to wait it out. Izuku sees red. A torn battlefield. Blood covers the floors. For humans stand against an impossible foe, immune to fists, guns, or steel. His only vulnerability is the sun, whose light cannot reach the darkened confines of the fortress. Despite their weakness, despite their fragility, despite their fatigue, despite their wounds, the humans fight. They hold blades while missing limbs. They attack weaknesses despite being blind. They utilize blood demon arts though they are human. They fight knowing their deaths are almost certain. Despite their resolve, their strength is not enough. The demon still draws breath, his neck intact. Eventually, they will falter, and the demon will reign victorious. They need to finish this now. They make a desperate attempt to close the gap between them, dodging dozens of slashes, employing all of the techniques they've learned, using every last ounce of energy in their bodies to move forward, until Izuku tries to calm himself down. These so-called heroes aren't even deserving of the air they breathe. He fails. Though they were my enemies, the Demon Slayer Corps fought an impossible battle every night. They were foolish, but I could respect their tenacity, their will. But this? He looks again towards the heroes doing nothing. Is this what humanity has fallen to? Izuku clenches his fists. Are these the inheritors of the world the Demon Slayer Corps fought for? Died for? No. Izuku reassured himself. This world has no connection to the one I know. The denizens of this society are simply accustomed to the comfort of a peace they do not deserve. In an attempt to distract himself, Izuku focuses on Bakuga's current state. He won't be able to hold out much longer. The oxygen deprivation will lead to permanent brain damage if he isn't released soon. On any other day, he would have turned around and left. If Bakuga was too weak to survive his encounter with the villain, then it was always his fate to die. His strength simply was not enough, and nothing could change that. But the comments of the heroes aroused feelings of rage that had been dormant for 14 years. And if these heroes truly believed that they needed the assistance of their betters to resolve the situation, then Izuku was happy to oblige. Things were looking really bad. The slime villain had decimated most of the store fronts, and the hostage was still struggling to breathe in the mass of mucus and smoke. Death Arms, can't you try throwing a car to distract the villain? Not if I want to explain to the media why I flattened a kid to paste. Negative, too risky. We have to wait for someone with a better quirk to show up. I feel like shit for standing around and practically doing nothing while the kid chokes on slime, but what other choice do I have? Death Arms moved to keep the crowd at a safe distance. This is the best I can do, good luck, kid. It was then that he noticed a middle schooler with his head down slowly making his way through the crowd, carrying a guitar case on his back. Hey kid, it's too dangerous here. I'm gonna need you to get farther back. The boy didn't respond. Kid, you listening to me? Goddamn brats, so desperate to get a view of the action. The boy still remained silent. Death Arms started to lose his patience. Hey, get behind the... And then the boy was gone. Making a swift dash towards the slime villain, he threw away his guitar case to reveal a katana with a size about the length of his legs. Unsheathing the blade, he ran far faster than his size seemed to suggest possible. Are you suicidal, kid? Get back here. Is that a goddamn katana? A variety of voices clamored. But none of that seemed to bother the student. He simply continued down his path, hurtling towards the source of the destruction. Finally, the slime villain noticed the lone assailant. What, you again? Oh no, no way in hell you're getting me this time. Picking up a trashed car, he tossed it with the force of a speeding train. Second form, pearl flower moongazing. Suddenly, 3 slashes cleaved through the remains of the car, separating them just enough to allow him to pass through unharmed while the metal and asphalt crashed together behind him. Trying again, the villain picked up some loose concrete remains of the street and hurled it in the same form of a shotgun blast towards the approaching threat. Instead of deflecting the wall of debris headed his way, the boy slid towards a fallen store sign to use as cover before jumping over it and continuing his rush after the danger had passed. How the hell is he bouncing around like that? I thought his quirk was his eyes. Realizing he was getting closer, the mass of slime aimed one of Bakugu's explosions towards the base of a crumbling wall in an attempt to crush Izuku, who drew his sword once more. Sixth form, Perpetual Night, Lonely Moon. 6 slashes tore the wall to pieces where it stood, allowing Izuku to finally reach striking distance of his opponent. Changing tactics, the slime villain threw a wave of slime at the 6-eyed swordsman in a desperate attempt to overwhelm him with mass instead of speed. To his surprise, he found his target had vanished from his sight. The villain panicked. Where the hell did he? Fifth form, Moon Spirit Calamitous Eddy. From below, a vortex of blades consumed the center of the villain, separating him from his prey and splattering his mucus across the ground. Ayard fuck! Screaming in frustration, the bubbling remains of the slime villain attempted to reform itself in order to retaliate against the immediate threat, but to his surprise saw the boy calmly sheathing his sword while walking away. Is this goddamn brat trying to making fun of me? Raising what was left of his fist, the villain prepared to crush both the hostage and his savior together. Let's see how you like this, you goddamn. Detritzmeas. The last thing he saw before getting blown into the stratosphere by All Might was the disappearing form of the boy with 6 eyes. Walking home, Izuku was thankful for the All Might's eventual appearance, both because it gave him an excuse not to permanently blind the attacking villain and because it allowed him to quietly slip away while fans and media alike swarmed the #1 hero. That was my first real combat experience in 14 years. My skills and reaction times have become lacking. He crushed an empty can underfoot. Though my training is adequate, I clearly need to practice sparring with a variety of opponents, otherwise I will become complacent. The only trouble will be finding individuals worth sparring with. The vast majority of them are little more than children swinging their favorite toys. Deku. And speaking of children, Izuku turned around to face the explosive blonde he had saved. Panting as though he had been running for a while, his classmate stood across from him, clenching both of his fists. He was refusing to make eye contact with Izuku. Judging from his demeanor, he has no intention of expressing gratitude or regret. He was disappointed. I had hoped that the life-threatening experience would have motivated him to reconsider his indignant approach to life, but it seems he's even more stubborn than I had assumed. I didn't need your goddamn help, all right, he yelled. I could have gotten out of there all by myself. You just got in the way. Just because you had an excuse to cut shit up doesn't mean you're any less of a villain, you got it? And with that, he ran off. What a pitiful child. Well, at least he's gone. Finally free of distractions, Izuku could make his way home and... I am here. Dashing from around the corner, All Might made his presence known. Truth be told, Izuku was starting to seriously consider unleashing a technique on the next person who interrupted his journey home. "Greetings, All Might. Is there something you wanted?" Forcing a neutral face, Izuku tried to end the conversation as soon as possible. "There is, young man." He paused dramatically. "The truth is, I wanted to." A torrent of blood came out of his mouth as he transformed back to his normal form. Izuku once again had to wait a few seconds for the number one hero to stop coughing blood so they could resume their conversation. All Might eventually returned to breathing normally. "The truth is, I wanted to thank you for what you did for me today." Izuku tilted his head. "Whatever did I do for you?" The gaunt man pointed a finger at him. "When everyone else was standing by and letting that villain torture that young man, you and you alone rushed in to save him. You made me remember what it meant to be a true hero and allowed me to push past my own limits to save you both. I was not the one in need of saving, but very well. Though I do not know why you carry a katana, I do know this. You have the heart of a true hero. Your body moved before you could think, yes? That's exactly what separates you from the rest, my boy." He stepped closer to Izuku. "You can be a hero." Izuku stared incredulously at the man in front of him. What in the eight hells is this man talking about? "Well, thank you very much for the compliment, but I must be leaving now. Farewell." "Wait, there was something else I wanted to discuss." Izuku was starting to lose his patience. "Yes? What else?" "Young man, the truth is that I want you to be my successor." All Might had been searching for years, and finally he'd found him. His successor. He'd been pushing his limit as it was, and he knew that he was running out of time to find someone to pass one for all to. However, Lady Luck had smiled on him today, bringing him the perfect hero to train into the next symbol of peace. All he had to do was accept. But the boy was silent. "Young man, you want me to succeed you?" All Might beamed. "But of course, you demonstrated a heroic nature like no other. It's only natural that I would want you to inherit my quirk." The boy's eyes narrowed. "Inherit? You were given your quirk by another?" "Indeed." All Might laughed. "It's a stockpiling quirk that grows stronger with each transfer, it's called." "I refuse." All Might's breath hitched in his throat. "What? I have no need for a burden like that." "But why?" "The quirk itself bestows enormous strength. You'll be able to save more people than ever before. Please, at least. I already bear one legacy. I do not need another." The boy turned around a corner. "A legacy? Wait." Young man, All Might rounded the same corner to follow him. But he was already gone. Succeed the number one hero laughable. Izuku was making his way home after more than a few interruptions and took the time to ponder the proposition he had been given by the symbol of peace. As if I needed another legacy to pass on, not to mention the liability associated with it. He grimaced in thought. Thinking about it objectively, gaining another quirk would only hinder my efforts to perfect my moon-breathing technique as well as my search for a successor. Whatever extra strength I would gain as a result of the quirk transfer would throw off the execution of my forms. Even worse, once I did get accustomed to the change, I would have to give it away upon finding a successor, or risk a weaker student dying before they could pass on the technique. Besides, to my knowledge, All Might is capable of destroying entire city blocks with a single punch. Such widespread destruction is unfitting of the moon-breathing style. I would much rather maintain my reliable, precise strength than the uncontrollable destruction that All Might wields. Most importantly, I have no intention of becoming a so-called hero, especially if my contemporaries would be made up of the cowards I saw today." Izuku finally reached the door to his house. At least I now know why his extra toe joint exists despite his quirk. Falling into his bed, he focused his thoughts on the road ahead. "For now, I'll continue my own training. Though I do not know what sort of trials await me at the UA exam, I'll be sure to spare no effort in training myself in both mind or body." 10 months later, Izuku was standing at the front gates of UA on the day of the exam. He had sufficiently studied for the written portion, but had dedicated a majority of his time to improving the speed, power, and accuracy of his moon-breathing techniques. Though he still lacked his blood demon art, Izuku's current level of skill was more than sufficient for dealing with whatever the practical portion of the exam could throw at him. And since his request to use his katana as a support item was approved, he was fully prepared to tackle any obstacles the UA staff placed in his way. From behind, he heard a certain blonde's telltale stomps approaching him. Bakugo attempted to bump into Izuku to push him off balance, but found that his shoulder had missed its target, and his target was now staring at him inches from his face. Bakugo's dilation of pupils and increase in heart rate was obvious both to him and his six-side opponent, though he attempted to disguise it with false bravado. "Stay the hell out of my way, Deku," he sneered before walking towards the registration area. Izuku stared at his distant figure until he heard another voice come from behind. "Geez, what's his problem? Exam jitters get to everyone, but that doesn't mean he should take it out on other people. Are you okay?" Turning around to meet the bubbly-sounding stranger, he found a girl his age with chestnut-colored hair and a permanent blush on her cheeks. She also had strange pads on the tips of her fingers, suggesting a touch-activated quirk. Izuku noticed her flinch when his eyes met hers. "I am all right. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to register for the exam." He started to walk away. Huh? Oh yeah? Good luck," she replied, smile slightly strained. Izuku did not respond. The written portion of the exam was elementary. Izuku had long since memorized most of the material it had covered back when he was a child. Knowledge in this world was far more accessible than the one of old, and Izuku had made full use of that throughout his life. When he wasn't training at the beach, he was studying at the library. Thanks to his efforts, the vast majority of the exam turned out to be a breeze. The only part of the exam where he had to actually think came during the morals and ethics portion. It questioned his opinion on heroes, criminal punishment, and the value of human life. He had to be careful not to answer too truthfully, but to still come off as genuine to the examiners when they graded his responses. Izuku chose a middle ground, harsh compared to the average respondent, but not to the point where it raised alarms. Though it pained him to write against his true beliefs to soothe the fears of weaklings he didn't respect, he thought it better than getting kicked out of the school before the term had even begun. And with that, he was ready to move on to the practical portion of the exam. Finding his spot in the lecture hall, Izuku noticed he was right next to Bakugo, who had the same sneer on his face as he always did. Soon after he took his seat, the voice of a hero with ridiculously styled blonde hair echoed through the room. "What's up, listeners? Can I get a hey?" Silence was the only response. "That's coolio," he continued. "Here's how it's going to go. Each of you are going to be sent to one of 7 testing locations, where you'll have 10 minutes to take on 3 different kinds of robot villains. Use your quirks however you want, but no attacking competitors. May I ask a question?" A stern voice rang out. "Go ahead." On the handout, there are no less than 4 villains running around the city. If this is a printing mistake, it is one unfitting of the UA institution, he declared. Turning around, he pointed a finger at Izuku. "And you? Why are you bringing a sword when it's obviously not an aspect of your quirk? Are you attempting to intimidate other participants?" Izuku raised his face to meet his aggressor, who flinched upon seeing his eyes. "All right, examinee 7111. Students can apply for whatever support items they may need to use during the exam." As for the packet trying to move on, the hero went to address his first comment. "The 4th and final villain is worth 0 points, so he's more of an obstacle than a target. It's best to just get out of its way when it shows up." He reached the final slide of his presentation. "That's all I got for you guys, so go on out there and break a leg. Plus ultra." Break a leg, what an odd platitude. Leaving the hall, Izuku started to make his way to his assigned bus. Reaching the starting line for his assigned location, Izuku realized there was a bit of time before the exam actually began and decided to appraise his competitors. He was not impressed. "Look at these fledglings, almost all of them have solely trained the parts of their body that relate to their quirk. They lack spatial awareness, move without purpose, and are ill-prepared for actual combat." He quietly sighed. Hopefully the other testing locations have more promising individuals. Suddenly, he sensed someone approaching from behind. Turning around, he realized it was the same boy who called him out in the lecture hall. Startled at being noticed, he held a look of surprise before returning to the stern expression he usually held. "Are you still carrying that sword? Seeing as how your quirk relates to your eyes, I see no justification for you to be carrying extra weaponry. Don't you think that's unfair to your fellow competitors? He admonished. Izuku stared at him for a moment, then started to walk away. Shocked, speechless for a moment, the boy stood still for a moment, but then started to follow. Wait, didn't you hear me? It's unbecoming of a hero to act so irresponsibly. Izuku didn't look behind him. Do not speak to me of responsibility when you know nothing of its meaning. The boy was about to question his response, but his attention focused elsewhere when out of nowhere a voice rang out from the surrounding speakers. Begin. Silence and confusion resonated around the field. What's wrong? In real life, there are no countdowns. Go, go, go. And as he joined the mob crossing the starting line, he turned back to see the boy with the sword had disappeared. Dashing down the street, Izuku sliced through dozens of robots on his way to the center of the city. It seems these machinations are constructed with a steel-aluminum alloy. Its density is much lower than usual, likely to reduce the chance of serious injury among the examinees. For now, the use of my forms is unnecessary. He cleaved through the torso of a three-pointer before splitting a two-pointer down the middle. 33 points. I'll be on track to surpass 100 points before the exams end. To Izuku's left stood a boy with horns struggling with an attacking one-pointer. Single target, worth 1 point. Not worth stopping to destroy. He continued on, leaving his competitor to their fate. Reaching a crossroads, Izuku saw a crowd of robots charging towards him. Izuku's eyes narrowed, like pigs to the slaughter. In the observation room, UA staff were proctoring the exam, looking for cheaters, the injured, and potential standout students. For better and for worse, they were finding all three in spades. Examinee 4851 in Testing Center East just tied up 2 other examinees. Examinee 9422 just sprained an ankle. Someone go pick him up. That explosive one is starting to present more of a threat to the kids than the robots. Should we tell him to cool off? In the middle of the room, Kiyama Namuri, aka Midnight, was searching for any interesting examinees to keep an eye on when she noticed her contemporary Aizawa Shoyuta, aka Eraserhead, intently staring at one of the screens. Sauntering over to him, she popped over his shoulder. Hey Shoyuta, what's got you so invested in the exam? Someone catch your eye? If someone did, the expression on his face didn't indicate it was in a good way. You could say that. Taking a peek at the monitor, Namuri barely saw the outline of a boy dashing through the city streets, cutting apart faux villains with a speed far surpassing any of the other examinees. She could barely believe her eyes. Holy crap, that kid is crazy. How many points does he have? Right now he's at 80. He's miles ahead of everyone else, and at the rate he's going he'll probably blow past 100 by the time the exam's over. Aizawa replied passively. He might actually beat All Might's record. What's the little guy's quirk? He narrowed his eyes. That's the thing. It's registered as a mutation type, 6 eyes. Namuri couldn't help but be surprised. Mutation-type quirks weren't exactly weak pursuit, but they rarely led to the kind of strength and speed that the person on the screen was exhibiting, especially at such a young age. She tilted her head. So do his eyes power up the rest of his body or something? Nope. The only thing separating him from someone without a quirk is that he has 2 more pairs of eyes. Is that it? She stared incredulously at the screen. Apparently, but I'm starting to have my doubts. No normal human could pull off the moves he is, and definitely not at that speed. I'm going to ask Nizu to look into this. As though speaking his name summoned the rodent himself, Nizu crawled out from a vent underneath the table and acknowledged the request. I already am. Midoriya Izuku is proving himself to be a fascinating mystery, but for now please grade his actions as you would any other applicant. Aizawa gave a slight nod before returning his attention to the screen. Nizu jumped over to a red button on the dashboard, and, to help facilitate that, we'll be releasing the 0-pointer. Skewering the circuitry of a 3-pointer, Izuku tore his katana from the shredded remains of the defeated robot. That makes 128. He was about to make his way towards another group of bots when the ground beneath him started to shake. Centering his weight, he looked off to the distance to see the rising figure of the 0-pointer. It towered over the surrounding buildings, well over 80 meters in height. Izuku couldn't help but compare it to the largest opponent he had ever faced in his previous life. Impressive, its size surpasses even that of Doma's water lily bodhisattva technique. Truly, the marvels of this world never cease to surprise me. Look at the size of that thing. Are they actually trying to kill us? Screw taking that down. I'm out of here. A cacophony of voices blended together, expressing fear and panic at the arrival of the zero-pointer. Noticing the mob of people running away from the walking skyscraper, Izuku understood that he should probably follow. The zero-pointer itself presented no opportunity for more points, nor would it increase his chances of entry in any way. It would be pure foolishness to engage. But Izuku couldn't help but be curious. How does the moon-breathing technique compare against foes of such extreme size? There was only one way to find out. Jumping over the escaping mob, Izuku made a dash towards the base of the zero-pointer, ignoring a girl stuck under a piece of concrete. Focusing his vision on the inner machinations of the overwhelming opponent ahead of him, he spotted a weakness. The power that flows throughout its body stems from the base of its head. That must be where its energy core is. If I can overload its power flow by destroying its regulator, then the rest of the circuitry should overload. His lips turned into a smile and make for an explosive end. Raising its massive limb, the zero-pointer attempted to crush the approaching insect. Despite the clear difference in size, Izuku did not falter. Positioning his sword for an upward cleave, he prepared to unleash one of his techniques. Moon breathing, third form, loathsome moon, chains. 2 slashes slipped through the gaps in the zero-pointer's armor, mutilating the base of its foot and destabilizing its posture. Using its momentary weakness as an opportunity, Izuku jumped onto its leg, running along the camouflage-colored steel to reach his destination. In an attempt to shake off the intruder, the zero-pointer swung its leg into a nearby building, toppling the structure in an explosion of dust and debris. Many onlookers feared for the swordsman's life, but his figure emerging from the dust assuaged their concerns. Still approaching the head, the zero-pointer switched tactics. Launching missiles from silos on his shoulder, Izuku soon faced an impossible barrage of projectiles coming from all sides. Fifth form, Moon Spirit Calamitous Eddy. A barrage that was dispelled with a whirlwind of slashes, with each missile exploding in pink smoke before they could find their target. Reaching the torso, Izuku started his final dash to the base of the giant's head when its 8 eyes began to brighten with an ominous red glow. A sudden increase in temperature originating from its core. Foreseeing the attack, he made a detour under its arm before 8 lasers blasted the spot he was occupying a second before. Running up the zero-pointer's back, Izuku finally reached the source of the robot's energy, a collection of battery cells that connected to the rest of the circuitry in its body. Taking the hilt of his katana and bringing it to eye level, he positioned his right palm to the bottom of the handle and aimed the tip of the blade at the voltage regulator a few feet below the surface of its armor. Fourth form, Waning Moon, Crescent Plunge. Thrusting the blade of the katana into the armor down to the hilt, Izuku felt his weapon pierce its target and destroy the voltage regulator. Without it, the zero-pointer's ability to control its own power flow was void. Looking deep in the internal workings of the robot, he knew that its destruction was now only a matter of time. The cells are becoming less stable. Critical overload is imminent. Pulling the blade from its slot in the armor, Izuku made a mad dash away from the core right before it exploded in a lightning storm of blue light and shrapnel. Knowing the worst was yet to come, he jumped off the robot and started free-falling towards the ground. 80 meters away. Thankfully, a few dozen meters before he splattered into paste, he thrust his blade into the side of the building. He was near to slow his descent enough to survive when he touched the ground. Need to get to cover. Leaping around the corner, Izuku prepared for the zero-pointer's power flow to reach critical levels. 321. A crowd of teachers surrounded the screens depicting the chaotic scene at Testing Center B. Discussions were ramping up regarding whether the applicant who attacked the zero-pointer was brave, dumb, or suicidal. Among them, Present Mick's voice rang out through the murmurs. Well, at least the kid knew to give up after he found out he bit off more than he could chew. Ain't nothing wrong with picking your battles. He endangered himself and others by engaging an enemy in a battle where he had no chance of victory. A reckless hero like that is going to be more of a liability than an asset in the field. Eraserhead chided. Whoa there, he had a little chance. After all, the little listener managed to cut up the metal monster's foot and neck. That's got to count for something. The sleep-deprived hero glared at his polar opposite. Would you say the same if this were a fight with a real villain? If the actions he took didn't neutralize the threat, then his actions were pointless. I wouldn't be so sure about that. Power Loader cut in. Eraserhead was starting to get tired of the endless optimism surrounding him. What are you talking about? He failed to take it down, turned tail, and ran away. That's about as pointless as it gets. A crazed laugh cut through the discussion. All heads turned towards Nizu, who was in the middle drinking his signature tea in gulps. I believe you should save whatever comments you may have for another 5 seconds. Mike tilted his head. What happens in 5? An ear-splitting explosion rocked the walls of the observation room. Whoa. What the hell? Are we under attack? Panic spread across the room, and only the stalwart voice of Nizu brought a semblance of order back to the teachers. Staff, please remain calm. That explosion was simply the result of examining 1912's pointless actions. Staring through the shaking 2-inch thick glass, the heroes saw the mangled remains of the zero-pointer in Battle Center B. The smoke and ash rising from its destruction reached far into the sky, resembling more of a mushroom cloud after a bomb than the result of a practical examination. What the hell did he do? Cementos asked incredulously. Power Loader rubbed the back of his head. He stuck a goddamn sword through the voltage regulator of the energy core on the zero-pointer. After it was destroyed, the robot had no way of controlling its power output, and the ensuing damage cascaded into a core meltdown. Wait, how did he know where the voltage regulator was, and what would happen if it was destroyed? Hound Dog questioned from across the room. How the hell should I know? All I know is that all of my hard work for the past few days just went up in a puff of smoke. Do you know how much overtime I'm going to have to put in to salvage this mess? And the paperwork. Power Loader continued his rant long after others had stopped listening. On the other side of the room, a grinning Nizu approached Eraserhead. So, do you still maintain the opinion that examining 1912's actions were pointless? Eraserhead looked away. Maybe not, but they were certainly reckless. Causing that kind of wanton destruction won't earn him any points in my book. Apparently done with the conversation, he started to walk away. Nizu called after him. Well, then I suppose it's a good thing you specialize in controlling such loose cannons. Eraserhead? He stopped. He wouldn't dare. I hope you find him as much a delight in the class as he was in the field. In grim acceptance of his fate, Eraserhead sighed, hung his head, and left the observation room. Nizu returned his attention to the monitors as his grin grew wider. What a fascinating crop of students. I can't help but have the distinct feeling that this is going to be a very exciting year. Making his way through the dust and debris, Izuku eventually put enough distance between him and the mangled remains of the zero-pointer to breathe actual air. It took me 47.3 seconds to eliminate the zero-pointer. A shame. If I still had my blood demon art, it would have only taken me 1. As soon as he reached a clearing, a voice boomed over the speakers. And that's time. Please cease engaging the robots and proceed to the exit. You can expect your results within a few weeks. Plus Ultra. Izuku sheathed his sword with a click. So I managed to score 128 points. I suppose that's satisfactory. In all likelihood, I'll be accepted into Class 1A once I get my results. When he started to make his way to the exit, a voice called out from behind him. Excuse me. Turning around, Izuku realized the person calling out to him was the same girl he had encountered near the entrance gates. She had a look of slight trepidation on her face and was hobbling on one foot. Yes? She suddenly bowed her head. Thank you so much for saving me. Silence. I see she must have me confused with someone else. I believe you have the wrong person. Good day. What? No. Aren't you the one who stopped the zero-pointer when I got trapped under concrete? Thinking back to the moment he first engaged the robot, Izuku realized he did remember running past a girl trapped under debris. So she managed to somehow incapacitate herself during the exam. How utterly baffling. Oh, no need to thank me. I was simply following my own desires to strike down a daunting opponent. The girl blushed for some reason. Eh, oh, okay. If that is all, I'll be taking my leave. He turned and started walking in the direction of the exit. I hope we see each other again at UA. She called out to him. And for the second time that day, he didn't respond. Long after the examinees had returned home, the UA staff were going over the applicants' scores and exam footage to determine who would and would not attend the most prestigious hero school in the country. Present Mike picked up Izuku's file. But man, this little listener was crazy, slicing through all of those robots like they were nothing, and then blowing up the zero-pointer to top it all off. He's going to make one hell of a hero. I have my doubts. Cementos objected. Unlike almost every other applicant, Midoriya took out every villain lethally. No wonder, since that sword of his leaves little chance of survival for its victims. I'm sure he can find a way to work around it. Mike brushed him off. Besides, it's not like he attacked any other applicants, so in my book he's good. Heroics is not a field in which the bare minimum should be judged as the finish line. Eraserhead suddenly appeared from behind. More importantly, the only hero points he scored was when he stopped the zero-pointer to save that trapped applicant, and even then I question if that was his motive. Mike tilted his head. What do you mean, Shoyuta? Of course he did it to save the damsel in distress. The thing was worth 0 points. Why else would he attack an 8-meter-tall robot? I don't know, just because he could? Namuri chimed in. Mike groaned. You guys get too damn cynical whenever applications come in. Looking for a fresher perspective, he called out to the faculty's newest member. Hey Tashinori, what do you make of this kid in Testing Center B? You annoyed that he beat your record? Tashinori turned his head at the sound of his name. Though his secret had been revealed to the staff of UA in order to facilitate his new position, he was still surprised at how accepting all of them had been of his condition. Not only that, but they'd all been extremely helpful in teaching him the duties and responsibilities that formal educators have at an institution like UA, so he was very grateful to them. Tashinori walked over to Mick's side, smiling all the way. No, I can't say that I am. Knowing that the future of our society rests in the hands of such competent future heroes only makes me. Blood spewed out of his mouth. Whoa. You okay? Aim away from applications. Finally calming down, Tashinori picked up the folder Mike had been talking about to get a closer look. And his eyes did not deceive him. It's him. A few weeks later, Izuku was practicing his breathing in his room when he was interrupted by the sound of his mother frantically banging on his door. Letting out a sigh, he rose to his feet and walked to his door, opening it to reveal Inko holding an envelope with the UA seal on it. Izuku, a letter from UA came in. Did you apply there? He slowly nodded his head. Indeed I did. I took the exam a few weeks ago. He reached out to grab the envelope. Relinquishing it, Inko's expression turned to one of surprise. You want to be a hero? Why didn't you say anything? How did the exam go? Do you want to open the letter, Toj? No thank you, mother. I'll inform you of the results later. He closed the door on her face. Returning to his desk, Izuku opened the envelope to find a device the size of his palm resting inside of it. Placing it flat on the desk, it beeped to life and projected a screen out of thin air. And on that screen beamed the smiling face of All Might. Hello, young Midoriya. I must admit, I did not expect to see you again after our last encounter, but I'm delighted to have been proven wrong. He backed up a bit from the camera. This isn't known to the public yet, but you're looking at the newest addition to the UA faculty. I'll be teaching heroics for the coming year, so you and I are going to get to spend a great deal of time together. Izuku suppressed a sigh. Now, it's time to reveal the numbers you've been waiting for, your scores. On the written exam, you placed in the 96th percentile. Though there was much debate among the staff regarding your answers in the ethics and morals portion, the rest of your answers were exemplary. The grin on his face somehow grew even wider. Moving on to your practical results, you earned an astonishing 128 villain points. Blowing all of the other applicants out of the water, you surpassed the next highest scorer by over 50 points. Izuku didn't change his expression. His superiority over his contemporaries was as natural as the moon following the sun. As such, there was nothing to celebrate. But All Might continued on. Or at least, That's what I would be saying if there wasn't a secret judging criteria. You see, young Midoriya, we not only judged you based on how many foe villains you neutralized, but also by how heroic the actions you took were. Izuku's eyes narrowed. Heroic actions? I don't recall taking any heroic actions. The footage switched to the scene of him dashing towards the zero-pointer while all of the other applicants ran away in terror. It then paused on the frame of him running past the girl with the chestnut-colored hair trapped under some rubble. Facing down an impossible opponent for the sake of the helpless is the very essence of a hero. Not only that, but you successfully neutralized the zero-pointer before it could cause any major damage to its surroundings. Thanks to that, our judges saw fit to award you 50 hero points, giving you the top score of 178 and beating my record. Welcome, young Midoriya. This is your Hero Academia. The device shut itself off. Izuku leaned back in his chair. So there was a hidden criteria on which applicants were graded during the exam. Come to think of it, if I am to pretend to be a hero for any amount of time, I'll need to learn to rescue people without being instructed to. Arousing suspicion from the staff will only make my search for a successor more difficult. Izuku looked at his sword resting on the wall. Perhaps this year will prove to be more of a challenge than I thought. Bakuga stared at his open acceptance letter. Second place. His clenched fists shook on the desk. Second to him. He had trained years for this moment. He got over 100 more points than me. Ran until he collapsed, lifted weights until his bones creaked, practiced his quirk until blisters littered his hands. And it still wasn't enough. But worse than that, worse than losing, worse than the feelings of inferiority crushing his soul, was knowing that the next 3 years would be spent with him, being haunted by those eyes. The one person he had been trying to escape all of his life, and now he was stuck with him. And there was nothing he could do. The empty room offered him no comfort. The bang of his fists hitting the desk cut through the silence. No, I've worked too hard to give up here. Gritting his teeth, he got up with enough force to knock his chair over. I'm not gonna let that fucking villain ruin my origin story. Throwing the letter in the trash, Bakuga forged a new resolution. I'm the only one who knows what kind of monster he really is. But one day he's going to screw up. He's going to let the mask slip, and when he does, I'll be there to put him down. After putting on the UA uniform, Izuku examined his appearance in the mirror. The modern jacket and pants felt alien to him, nothing like the kimono and hakama he had worn for centuries, but unfortunately, he did not have much choice in what he wore to school. In combat, the creases and shoulder pads did nothing but restrict his movements, and the tightness of the necktie around his neck slightly constricted his breathing. But in a worst-case scenario, he would simply discard the garments and continue the fight regardless. It wouldn't be the first time, anyway. The only saving grace was the katana by his side. Though there was much contention as to the legality of the sword in school, Izuku eventually got his way and was allowed to carry the weapon on his person. Accepting the impractical outfit, Izuku made his way to the front door when his mother called out from behind him. Izuku, are you heading off to school? After putting on his shoes, he opened the door. Yes, mother. I'll see you later tonight. Just want you to know, I'm really proud of you for making it. The sound of the door slamming shut interrupted her. Walking through the halls of UA, Izuku familiarized himself with his surroundings while making his way to his classroom. Long corridors and a lack of cover. From what I've researched, the firearms that once posed little challenge to me in the Taisho era can now fire upwards of 1,000 bullets in a minute. In these halls, such a weapon would be even more troublesome to deal with. Tightening his grip on the katana at his side, Izuku resolved to adapt to the newer threats posed in this world of the future. No matter, I've overcome all manner of obstacles. I doubt I'll find many here that surprise me. Though without my regeneration, my margin for error is much smaller than before. That is why it is more necessary than ever to find a worthy successor. Finally reaching Class 1A, Izuku peered through the walls to see what awaited beyond the giant doors before him. Most of the students were already seated at their desks, save for one who was arguing with another who had their feet positioned atop their desk. The boy from the entrance exam and Bakuga, respectively. Finally opening the door, Izuku got his first good look at the classroom full of potential successors. Scanning the sea of faces looking at him, He saw a few notable individuals who had the potential to properly wield the moon breathing technique. For one, the boy with the half-white, half-red hair had a form that was clearly well-trained, even though one half of his body had seemingly seen more use than the other. Interesting, his core body temperature is drastically different on both sides, suggesting some kind of quirk related to the elements. Next was the red-haired boy with the shark teeth, flashing him a smile from across the room. His epidermis layer of skin hides a mutated variant of tooth enamel, seemingly capable of making itself appear and disappear at will. His quirk likely increased the hardness of his skin to increase defense and offense, though I wonder what kind of limits exist in that regard. Finally, Izuku looked over at the tall, raven-haired girl in the back. Her quirk remained a mystery, though he could tell it involved energy conversion as her metabolism was working far too efficiently for it to be normal. Though she is a woman, her form and physical constitution hold promise. Besides Bakugo, those three stood out the most, though the rest of the class couldn't be discounted either. Each of them held their own unique quirks and strengths. And that's not even accounting for their sister class, 1B. A smile so small it was almost unnoticeable grew on his face. It seems there is hope yet for these fledglings. You. Speed walking towards Izuku. The boy from the entrance exam moved with the rigidity of an action figure. I am Ida Tenya, from Semi-Private Academy, and you. Suddenly he bowed his head. Are the superior candidate. You saw through the true nature of the exam before anyone else. A feat not even I could achieve. I am ashamed to admit it. Staring at the boy in front of him, Izuku came to a natural conclusion. I see he seems to have confused me with someone else. When he was about to inform him of his mistake, a bubbly voice came from behind. Ah, it's the boy with the sword. Turning around, Izuku came face to face with the girl who incapacitated herself during the exam. I knew it was you. It looks like we ended up in the same class. No wonder though, considering how you took down that zero-pointer. Murmurs arose from the rest of the classroom reacting to the new piece of information. He actually fought the zero-pointer. What even is his quirk? He must be the kid who got first place on the exam. Wonderful, more awestruck children who've never witnessed a skilled combatant before. Before Izuku could excuse himself from the conversation and reach the solitude of his desk, he felt the presence of another creeping from behind and turned around. Time to introduce another class of hero hopefuls to reality. Crawling along the floor in his sleeping bag, Aizawa pondered on the coming year and the steps he would have to take with some of the more troublesome first years. Bakugo, a student who only scored villain points. Todoroki, a student with the baggage of the number 2 hero. And Midoriya, a student whose only method of dealing with a villain is by slicing them to bits with a sword. I've really got my work cut out for me this time. Approaching the door to 1A, he started to slow his crawl to remain unnoticed to the students within. Let's see how good their spatial awareness is. Rounding the corner, the first thing he saw was 6 red eyes staring back at him. Aizawa had been a pro hero for over 10 years. He'd dealt with all manner of cases, from petty theft to human trafficking, and had lost many nights of sleep to the horrors he'd witnessed. He thought he'd seen everything. But despite all of his experience, he couldn't help but flinch at Midoriya's piercing glare. His application photo really doesn't do him justice. Regaining his composure just as quickly as it had left, he slowly rose to his feet to address his new class. Welcome to the hero course. I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shoyuda. Tossing a pile of UA gym uniforms on one of the desks, he made it clear he was a man that wasted little time. Put these on and head out to the testing grounds. Turning around to lead the students to the changing rooms, Aizawa made his way out of the classroom. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see that Midoriya was still staring at him. Man, UA really doesn't mess around, huh? In the locker room, various boys discussed the new standards that were expected of them at UA. A boy with blonde hair pulled off his shirt. I guess that means we're in the big leagues now, huh? I gotta admit, I didn't think it would happen so soon. Most schools would ease us into it, wouldn't they? The only 3 people not participating in the various conversations were Todoroki, Bakugo, and Izuku. Izuku isolated himself in one corner of the locker room while taking his clothes off. That man, the rest of his body was normal, but his eyes were somehow mutated. Is it possible he has access to the see-through world? Whoa, dude, you're seriously ripped. Turning his head, he could see that the boy with red spiky hair was appraising his body with an impressed look on his face. How did you get a body like that? Izuku returned his attention to his locker. I merely trained when I could. An iron will forges an iron body. The boy's smile grew wider. True that, man. By the way, I'm Kirishima Ijiro. Nice to meet you. He reached for a handshake. The potential successor from before taking his hand, he reciprocated the gesture. Midoriya, nice to make your acquaintance. From across the room, Bakugo sneered. A boy with tape dispensers for elbows cut into the conversation. Hey, Midoriya, right? Why do you carry around a sword all the time? For self-defense. For self-defense? Isn't the sword a bit much? Izuku was starting to get irritated. Unfortunately, it's not quite enough. The dangers of villains are ever present, so my sword is necessary to secure my safety on a daily basis. The boy nodded in understanding. Ah, I get what you mean. My quirk isn't the best at taking villains down, so I need to brush up on my self-defense too. You think you could teach me a bit? Do you wield a sword? No? Then no. And with that, Izuku left the room, leaving an awkward atmosphere behind. Reaching the testing grounds, the first years were amazed by the size and scale of the area around them. However, before they could fully absorb it, they were interrupted by the cold voice of their teacher. Today, we'll be conducting a quirk assessment test. You'll be participating in a variety of physical examinations, but unlike your middle school ones, you'll be allowed to use your quirk. Pulling out a spherical device, he tossed it to Bakugo. Bakugo, what was your softball throw score in middle school? He caught it with one hand. 70 meters. Try it again, but with your quirk this time. With a maniacal grin, Bakugo stepped up to the plate with the ball in hand, ready to blow it out of the stratosphere. Die! And with a fiery explosion, the ball flew into the sky, eventually landing an exact 705.2 meters away, according to the measuring device in Aizawa's hand. The 1A teacher continued his lecture. The first step in becoming heroes is discovering what your limits are. These tests are designed to push you and your quirks to the brink. Excited murmurs arose from the crowd of students. Holy crap, 705 meters. We get to use our quirks? This is going to be fun. Aizawa's harsh voice cut through the chatter. Fun? You think the hero course is meant to be fun? Well then, how's this for fun? The student with the lowest score will be automatically expelled. The tune of the murmurs quickly switched from excitement to dread. What? No way. But it's only the first day. That's so unfair. Aizawa focused on the last comment. Unfair? Natural disasters, villain attacks, and unlucky accidents are all unfair in their treatment of the innocent, and yet they exist. It's the job of heroes to correct that unfairness. Izuku couldn't help but be confused by the last point made by the homeroom teacher. What is unfair about any of those things? If the victims were strong, they would survive whatever fate threw at them. If they were weak, then it's only natural their lives would be lost. That's the epitome of fairness. Apparently not reaching the same conclusion as he did, most of the class were stunned into silence. Satisfied with the looks of trepidation on their faces, Aizawa started the quirk assessment test in full. First off was the 50-meter dash, and though Ida and Ochako got respectable scores, what most students were excited for was the face-off between Midoriya and Bakugo, the first and second top scoring applicants on the entrance exam. Bakugo flexed his fingers and loosened his joints as he flashed Izuku a sneer, who simply ignored him. Ready, both students took their respective stances. Go! And with a bang, a cloud of smoke appeared at the starting line. A few seconds later, the winner was revealed. 3.5 seconds. Bakugo slid across the finish line at breakneck speeds. He pumped his fist in the air. Hell yeah! How do you like that, you worthless? He stopped and stared in disbelief. Because Izuku was casually trotting across the finish line, as if he were going for a morning jog. 9.5 seconds. Most of the class stared in shock at the supposed top scorer on the entrance exam scoring worse than most of the class. Was that it? Is he joking or something? I thought he would do something crazy. Despite the lukewarm reactions from his classmates, Izuku was satisfied with his score. Or rather, He didn't care what score he got. Why should I waste any amount of effort on a task as inconsequential as this? Judging by his heart rate, Aizawa was lying when he threatened expulsion, and exposing my full capabilities does me no favors. Returning to his classmates, he noticed Aizawa giving him an annoyed glare, but ignored him. During all this, Bakugo stood motionlessly at the finish line. Bakugo, return to the rest of your classmates. Giving no verbal response, Bakugo slowly followed his teacher's instructions, a look of blank shock on his face. The rest of the tests went much the same way. As impressive as the scores of his classmates were, Izuku continuously underperformed in every conceivable way. Speed, strength, endurance. None of his test scores indicated he was the same person that took down a zero-pointer without a scratch at the entrance exam. And Aizawa was losing his patience. Eventually, the time came for him to participate in the ball throw. Carrying his sword in one hand and the ball in the other, Izuku walked up to the plate and prepared to lob the ball for an average score. Suddenly, he felt a projectile shoot towards him from behind. Izuku's first instinct was to draw his sword and cut down the incoming attack, but he squashed it. I'm a student in a hero course. I've yet to commit any crimes, so they have no reason to try to detain me. The most likely explanation for this attack is that it's a restraining attempt meant to reinforce whatever lecture he has to give alongside it. Turning his head just enough to see the approaching weapon, Izuku analyzed its composition. It's a scarf made of a steel alloy, with carbon fiber woven in between the seams. The edges aren't sharp, so there's no harm in coming in direct contact with it. Letting his arm holding the ball be captured, Izuku did his best to act at least a little surprised at the actions taken by his teacher, who at the moment was holding an unimpressed look on his face. Do you think this is some kind of joke? Izuku narrowed his eyes. Whatever do you mean? Aizawa had seen too many kids like Midoriya, overconfident, relying on their test scores, or their quirks, or their reflexes, or daddy's money, or whatever single thing they had. All of them he expelled because even though they only excelled in one area, they thought that was enough to make it in a line of work as dangerous as heroics. No hero can be a one-trick pony, and certainly not one who can't even take a physical examination seriously. I've seen the footage from the entrance exam. Your scores in these tests don't demonstrate the level of physical prowess I saw you have that day. I don't know if you forgot, but your results in this assessment will determine whether you stay or leave my class. That's quite amusing, coming from you. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. And what exactly do you mean by that? Lowering his captured arm, Izuku turned his body to face his teacher. Your quirk resides solely in your optic nerve. It does not boost your strength, endurance, or speed. By your own criteria, your potential as a hero would be inferior compared to someone with a mild strength-enhancing quirk. It would be quite hypocritical of you to judge us by standards you yourself would not live up to, don't you think? Stunned into silence, both teacher and class stared at the antagonistic student. How the hell does he know that? I haven't even demonstrated my quirk, yet Aizawa's tone hardened. It's not about the results. It's about putting in the effort to overcome your shortcomings despite the limitations of your quirk. If you use the excuse that having the wrong quirk means your efforts are worthless, then you have no place being a hero. Izuku thought back to the heroes on the day of the slime villain incident. So then was all that talk of expulsion a lie? Why don't you half-ass your next throw and find out? Releasing his hold on the student, Aizawa motioned for him to finish the test. Looking between his teacher and the ball in his hand, Izuku moved back into position at the plate and prepared for an overhead throw. Total concentration, breathing, and with a swing of his arm and a burst of air, the ball went flying into the sky. After it hit the ground, Aizawa stared at the score. 230.6 meters. There's no way in hell his quirk is just having 6 eyes. Izuku made eye contact with Aizawa. Is my score satisfactory? A hum was the only response. After showing their scores and revealing the threat of expulsion to be a farce, Aizawa dismissed his class and left to report to Nizu on Midoriya's behavior. Rounding a corner, he came face to face with All Might, in a ridiculous yellow suit that clashed with his image of a professional hero. Why hello there, Aizawa. Fancy meeting you here. If I recall correctly, you just had your quirk assessment test with Class 1A, no? Aizawa groaned internally. Of course you would know that. During the assessment, your figure peeking around the corner was about as inconspicuous as a giant yellow school bus. I hope your new students reached your high expectations. I'd hate to have a repeat of last year. Well, I didn't expel any of them, and the only one that gave me trouble was that Midoriya kid. A look of interest crossed the number one hero's face. Midoriya? What do you think of him? Aizawa's expression turned pensive. He's keeping secrets. All Might tilted his head. Whatever do you mean? He purposefully held back on all of the tests to hide his full capabilities, and when I confronted him about it, he somehow figured out what my quirk was. If his quirk was just having 6 eyes, he wouldn't be able to do that. Isn't it possible he just recognized you? He shook his head. Information like the quirks and appearances of underground heroes aren't public knowledge, so there's no way he already knew who I was. Not only that, but when he actually put an effort in the ball throw, I erased his quirk in the middle of it, and he wasn't even fazed. All Might didn't know how to respond to his suspicions. I was seriously considering expelling him. Aizawa moved on. Why didn't you? He paused. I've expelled plenty of overconfident brats over the years. They talk a big game, show off a quirk, and think that's enough to become a hero. But when he challenged me, there wasn't any overconfidence in his mannerisms, only certainty. That kind of certainty only comes with years of experience, something Midoriya shouldn't have. The skill he has with his sword and his lack of hesitation in using it leads me to believe that his behavior is by design. All Might's eyes widened. You think he might have been trained by an assassin? I think that right now, the best place for him to be is in a closely monitored environment, surrounded by heroes. Aizawa turned away. From what I've seen of him, he has the potential to be one of the best heroes out there. He could do some serious good if he put his mind to it. But if he doesn't, that potential goes both ways. He walked away, leaving All Might behind. So, can anyone tell me which of these English sentences has an error in it? Sitting in class while pretending to listen to present Mike lecture about the English language, Izuku's mind instead drifted to his homeroom teacher's actions the day before. When I threw the ball during the test, something about his optic nerve changed, and yet I felt no difference. It wasn't the transparent world, as it's not an ability that needs to be turned on. More likely is that he was somehow testing me with his quirk, but for what reason? Izuku's eyes narrowed. It's possible he's become suspicious of my origins as a result of my conduct. True, it's odd for a student to hold such a combative attitude towards an authority figure. Combined with my fighting style and choice of weaponry, he likely suspects me of being related to a villain in some way or of being a villain myself. I'll have to be more mindful of my behavior in the future. I'd hate to have the faculty believe me to be a negative influence on my contemporaries. Moving on to appraise his fellow students, Izuku recalled the scores that had been revealed at the end of the quirk assessment. As I suspected, Momo, Todoroki, and Bakugo all hold great promise. They implemented their quirks in creative ways and had the physical ability to capitalize on them. Kirishima appears to lack a bit in the intellect department, but that potential can be fostered later. The ringing of the bell cut through his deliberations as the end of the class was signaled. All right, listeners, that's all I got for you. But don't forget to complete those handouts. Unless, of course, you want to get an earful from me. Though the hero spoke with a smile, most of the class shuddered at the idea of the literal loudest hero scolding them. One of the few exceptions was Izuku, who quietly made his way to the cafeteria to eat his lunch in solitude. All Might sat alone in the teacher's lounge, pondering the implications of Aizawa's suspicions. Trained by an assassin, it would certainly explain a lot. Thinking back to the day he first met him, seeing him slice apart a villain with little hesitation should have been a red flag. But he had gotten so caught up in the excitement of finding a potential successor that he hadn't given his actions much thought. Now that I think about it, no normal middle schooler would react to that situation in the way that young Midoriya did. And his proficiency with the blade is suspect. Recalling the boy's movements during the sludge villain incident and the entrance exam, All Might came to a sudden realization. Come to think of it, I don't recall his sword style from any of the major schools around Japan. Even among the villains I've fought that used swords, none of their attacks flowed so smoothly or attacked so precisely. Aizawa's theory was becoming more and more reasonable by the second. He shook his head. Even if he was trained by a villain, he's here now, in a school for heroes. That has to count for something. Affirming his resolve, All Might puffed up into his hero form and went to change into his Silver Age costume. He had to look his best for 1A's Foundational Heroics class. After lunch, Izuku sat at his desk reading a book on the history of heroics while the rest of 1A sat at attention in long-awaited anticipation of their next class. Finally, they'd be learning about the one subject that they had come to UA for, and who better to teach it than the #1 hero? I am here. Opening the classroom door, All Might shouted his signature phrase before calmly walking through, entering the door like a normal person. Holy crap, it's really All Might. And he's wearing his Silver Age costume. Foundational Heroics. In this class, you'll be introduced to the basics of what a hero does through a variety of trials. And what more exciting a way to start than with battle trials? Though excited discussions soon spread across the room, Izuku couldn't help but feel his disdain at the occupation of heroics increase once more. Battle? That's the foundation of heroics? Should it not be discipline, manners, spirit, or even how to provide medical treatment? I was under the assumption that heroes did more than fight. He sighed. Truly, there is no comparison with the Demon Slayer Corps. It's a well-known fact that the clothes make the man, and to demonstrate that, we've got your requested costumes ready for you to use. A wall in the classroom receded to reveal racks full of cases, each containing a student's corresponding hero outfit. Get changed, and on the double, time's a-wastin', rushing to get their hands on their long-awaited costumes. Each student nearly trampled over each other to get to their cases. Finally, when the crowd had left for the locker rooms, only one remained. Walking towards his assigned container, Izuku thought back to his previous life as he unclasped the latch on the case and opened it to reveal his signature purple kimono and hakama pants. It's been 15 years since I last wore the outfit I was once so familiar with. Picking up the kimono, he examined it to ensure the hexagonal design had been imprinted as instructed. It's not made of quite the same material that I'm used to, but I suppose this is as close as it needs to be. The outfit he held was almost identical to the one of old, the only difference being swapping out his straw sandals for actual shoes focused around mobility rather than defense. Of the many blessings Izuku was thankful for in this new world, not having to repair broken sandals after every fight was at the top of the list. Running his fingers through the fabric, Izuku mused over the significance the clothes had to him in his previous life. This attire represents the life I held before, one that pursued strength over all else, where my dream was to be the strongest samurai. That life ended in failure. When I put this on, will I be dooming myself to the same fate? Izuku thought of what it felt like for his body to crumble to dust as his greatest regrets plagued his mind. No. Clenching the fabric into his fist, Izuku took deep, cleansing breaths. I have the experience of a man who has lived for half a millennium. I've learned from my mistakes. I will never underestimate my opponents again. He placed the clothes back in the case as he made his way outside of the classroom. And I'll prove it today. Making his way to ground beta, Izuku observed the design choices of his fellow students. Some were well designed, such as Tokoyami's jet black cloak, which strengthened his quirk under its darkness. Others were bare bones, for example Hagakura's glove and boots, and a select few were nonsensical, case in point, Todoroki's half jumpsuit, half ice costume. Someone needs to give the children a lesson in practical design, though I suppose I don't have much room to talk. The only reason I chose these garments as my costume is because they're what I find most comfortable to fight in. All Might's voice boomed over the class. All right, you zygotes. Now that you all look like proper heroes, it's time for the battle trial. Sensei, will we be once again fighting robots in the city landscape, as we did in the entrance exam? Ida asked. Not this time. You'll be getting a taste of the real thing, indoor antipersonnel battles. After a series of confused faces crossed his vision, All Might continued. Though villains are commonly encountered outdoors, the more nefarious and clever ones will be found indoors, in the likes of buildings and underground bases, where their crimes are less likely to be exposed. To simulate the experience, you lot will be split into villain and hero teams, where you'll then face off in 2 versus 2 battles. ACU raised her hand. Wait, so when will we be having our Foundational Heroics class? This is the Foundational Heroics class. The best way to introduce you to the occupation is through practical experience. The only difference now is you won't be fighting scrap robots, but real people. Various questions shot out of the crowd of students. How is victory determined? Can I blow everyone away? Are you going to threaten to expel someone, like Aizawa? How will our teams be decided? Don't I look fabulous in this cape? One at a time. My quirk isn't super hearing, you know. Pulling out a folded piece of paper, All Might cleared his throat and began to explain the scenario. So, in the scenario, the villains are hiding a nuclear weapon, which the heroes will have to obtain. The heroes win by either neutralizing the villains or by making physical contact with the bomb before the time runs out. The villains win by either neutralizing the heroes or keeping them away from the bomb until time runs out. All Might took a breath. While you can use your quirks, reasonable force is expected. If you go too far, I will put a stop to the match. No one is getting expelled. The teams will be decided by lots. Your cape does, in fact, look fabulous. Ida raised his hand. Should the teams really be decided by chance? Oftentimes, heroes don't have a choice in which contemporaries they collaborate with. To simulate that, neither will you. I see. Thank you for the explanation. And without further ado, please find your assigned teammate. Looking at her assigned letter, Uraraka found that her teammate was Izuku. Finding the swordsman standing by his lonesome, she walked up to him and tried to make small talk. Hey Izuku, looks like we're teammates, huh? I look forward to working with you. Izuku slowly turned his head. I share the same sentiment. Then faced away. An awkward air fell over the two heroes in training. I really like your costume. It's very traditional. Is there any particular reason you chose it? Izuku stared down at his outfit. These garments are simply what I am most comfortable fighting in. It is adequate for combat, rescue, or recon situations. How did you decide on that? Gesturing towards Uraraka's skin-tight bodysuit, Izuku held a slight look of disdain on his face. Not that she noticed. Oh, I actually didn't send in a formal request for a costume. I wanted it to look like 13's outfit, but I guess I should have been more specific, huh? He nodded. Indeed, you should have. All right, let's begin. All Might's voice cut through the dry small talk. Our first match will consist of Team A as heroes versus Team D as villains. Team D has 5 minutes to prepare, so get a move on. Looking towards Team D, Izuku made eye contact with Bakugo, who flashed a malicious grin before stomping off to the battle site. Well, it seems my opportunity to appraise Bakugo's progress has come sooner than expected. I'm gonna kill that fucker. During Ida's boring ramblings about the exercise, Bakugo thought carefully about just how many pieces Izuku was going to be left in once he was done with him. Though it pains me to play the part of a villain, I will do what I must to ensure that the training exercise is a success. More importantly, how should we plan our defense, Bakugo? Izuku has proven himself to be a formidable opponent in combat, so my suggestion is that we use our quirks defensively in order to. Shut it, extra. Deku's mine, so stay out of my way and maybe I won't blast you to Kingdom Come. Flustered, Ida attempted to talk sense into his teammate. Wait, you can't seriously be thinking of taking on him alone, are you? Not to question your ability, but Izuku single-handedly destroyed the zero-pointer during the entrance exam. I think we should at least consider our option. Here's your options. Either stay here and defend the bomb, or capture Round Cheeks. You do anything else, and I'll kill your ass. With that, the signal to start sounded, and he blasted out of the room. Left alone, Ida sighed as he started to do the only thing he could, clean the area around the bomb of dust and debris. It looks like there are 5 levels the bomb could be on. What should we do? Getting ready to enter the building, Uraraka attempted to start a conversation with Izuku about what plan they should use during the exercise. The bomb is on the 5th floor. Bakugo will charge to use the moment he is allowed. Ida will remain with the bomb to guard it. I will engage Bakugo in combat while you circle around and keep Ida busy on the 5th floor. Once I have neutralized him, I will join you and we can capture the bomb together. Do you understand? All 6 of his eyes focused on her. She couldn't help it. She flinched. Yeah, I got it. To her relief, his attention shifted away from her as the start signal sounded and the duo entered the building. After walking for a few hallways, Izuku broke the silence. In about 20 seconds, I'll make contact with Bakugu. You should start making your way around. Do not attempt to assist me. Yeah, okay. Though surprised, Uraraka followed his instructions and started to walk down a different path. And with that, all interfering parties have been removed from the equation. Now alone, Izuku prepared to face his longtime acquaintance in combat for the first time in 10 years. That fucker's dead. Dashing through the halls, Bakugu's mind raced to find the location of the Suntobe stain on the wall. Hearing his hallmark steady footsteps ring out from around a nearby corner, he leaped and prepared a right haymaker to blast Izuku to dust, only to find empty space before him. Your strategy is lacking, Bakugu. Hearing a voice come from behind, he instinctively turned around and aimed the explosive haymaker in the opposite direction before it detonated. The resulting cloud of smoke and dust obscured Bakugu's sightlines of the hallway, but he knew who was standing in front of him. Fucking Deku. Too much of a coward to attack me from the front. Huh? No response. What? Got nothing to say. Suddenly, a projectile flew through the smoke at eye level. Dodging it, Bakugu found himself just off balance enough to be vulnerable when Izuku's figure came within striking distance. And then a palm strike landed right in his sternum. Hard. Flying backwards, he rolled on the ground a few times before coming to a stop on his back. Wheezing and coughing, he attempted to bring himself upright, only to fail. A few feet away, he could make out Izuku kneeling to pick up his thrown sword, still held in its sheath. When engaging an enemy, one must keep in mind the possibility that their own actions will be predicted, especially by a familiar acquaintance. Had you considered that, you would have realized that you were walking into a trap. Turning over to where he had aimed his first attack, Bakugu saw a smartphone on the ground still repeating the same sound of footsteps he had heard before. Motherfucker. Pulling himself to his feet, he kept his eyes on the six-eyed monster in front of him. You think you're so smart, don't you? Think you're better than me? Bakugu put up a fighting stance. Well, guess what, Deku? You're up against the future #1 hero, and I'll be damned if I get taken down by a villain like you. Izuku returned his blade to his side and faced his opponent. That's it, Bakugu. Show me your resolve. Show me what you're truly capable of. Back in the observation room, teachers and students alike were viewing the battle with trepidation. Geez, I didn't know Midoriya was the type to use dirty tricks like that. So unmanly, Kirishima sighed. Not necessarily, young Kirishima. When lives are on the line, any approach that increases the chances of success should be taken under consideration. Trying to at least act somewhat like a teacher, All Might defended Izuku's actions. Unfortunately, I doubt he had such admirable intentions. If he wanted to neutralize Bakugu as safely and as quickly as possible, wouldn't he have just struck him from behind when he still had the element of surprise? Yaoyorozu pointed out. The symbol of peace hadn't considered that. Well, too mean, it's possible that. Holy crap, look at them go, someone shouted out. Turning his attention back to the screens, All Might could see the battle between Bakugu and Izuku was starting to heat up. Bakugu continued attempting to land blasts on his opponent, but because of his narrow confines of the corridor, he couldn't swing his arms as wide as he was used to. Taking advantage of this, Izuku continued to engage him in close-quarters combat, constantly diverting the blast from Bakugu's palms away from their targets and opening him just enough to land a hit. With each strike, Bakugu became more and more frustrated, while Izuku maintained the same unreadable expression. How is Midoriya landing so many hits? Kaminari asked. A major advantage young Midoriya has over his opponent is his costume. Young Bakugu's gauntlets, though dangerous at longer ranges, make for slow and clunky weights in CQC. It stands in stark contrast to young Midoriya's flowing kimono that, while low in defense, more than makes up for it in agility. Finally being able to talk about something he knows about, All Might gave his commentary on the on-screen battle. Not only that, but the environment works in Midoriya's favor as well. If they were fighting in an open field, Bakugu would have the room to maneuver a lot more creatively, but in the narrow hallways of a building, he's limited to staying on foot. Worse yet, the concrete walls means he can't use his blasts at full power without the risk of shrapnel seriously injuring either him or Midoriya. Yaoyorozu added. A bead of sweat fell down All Might's face. Young Yaoyorozu, while I appreciate your input, please don't upstage your teacher. Though I suppose that's to be expected from one of the recommended students. As the fight wore on, it became clear that one of them was doing much better than the other. Bakugo was bruised and bleeding, while Izuku looked like he had barely broken a sweat. On top of that, Bakugo had up until that point been unable to land a single hit on his opponent. In each exchange, Izuku always came out as the clear victor. But the battle didn't end. Izuku continued raining blows, even as Bakugo's stance became unsteady. The observation room started to take on an uncomfortable air. Siro's uneasy voice cut through the silence. Does this feel a bit like bullying to anyone else? I mean, clearly he could finish it right now if he wanted to, so why doesn't he? The shadows have consumed his soul, such a mad banquet of darkness. Tokoyami mumbled. I don't know if I'd put it like that, but it does seem like he's getting a bit too into the exercise. Shouldn't you put a stop to it, All Might? Ajiri questioned. All Might's grin wavered. Truthfully, if this were a real combat scenario, young Midoriya would likely be charged with excessive force. Why is he continuing this charade? He doesn't look like he's enjoying it. If young Midoriya goes too far, I will intervene, but for now the match continues. All Might's eyes focused on Izuku's expressionless face on the screen. What are you thinking right now, young Midoriya? What a disappointment. Staring at the nearly unconscious combatant, Izuku tried to understand Bakugo's lack of growth over the course of the fight. I tried to push him to his limits, but he relies on the same tactics despite their continued failure. Just reckless attempts to land a hit without a shred of a plan. Perhaps I have not pushed him enough? Landing a blow to the solar plexus, Bakugo keeled over before throwing a desperate hook that Izuku easily dodged. Perhaps this is his limit for now. Unless. Izuku took a few steps back. This is a pathetic display, Bakugo. Truthfully, I expected more of you. Although I suppose I have no one to blame for that but myself. Bakugo's mind refocused. Is this all the future #1 hero has to offer? If so, then my advice to you is to give up. If you can't defeat me, you'll never be able to reach the peak of heroics. Although if you're lucky, you may be able to become a sidekick. The light returned to Bakugo's eyes as he regained his footing. You, little piece of shit. Positioning his palms to face behind him, he prepared for a frontal attack with everything he had left. I'll make you eat those words, Deku. And then he blasted forward before twisted his body for a roundhouse kick. Dodging the kick aimed high, Izuku almost attacked before realizing Bakugo was using the momentum of his kick for a sweep, which came a little too close to hitting its mark. Finally, some planning. And with that they continued their fight. While at first rejoicing at the renewed energy of his opponent, Izuku soon realized that Bakugo's words had been nothing but hot air. Though he was moving faster before and with more strategy behind his moves, using his blast from his palms to facilitate the movement of his limbs for faster reaction times in attack and defense, there was no greater plan to his actions. He was just throwing darts at a board hoping one would stick. Well, I suppose for now his skill level makes for a decent starting point as my successor. I'm running out of time, so I'll be putting a stop to this. Seeing Bakugo go for another right hook, Izuku ducked under it and landed an elbow strike to his kidney before sliding behind him, kicking in the back of his knees and landing a knife hand strike to the side of his neck. With that, Bakugo finally fell over with a thud, allowing Izuku to tie his hands with the capture tape he had been given. All Might's voice came over the speakers. Bakugo Katsuki has been captured. Izuku then heard Uraraka's voice come in through his comms. Izuku, how did it go with Bakugo? He started to make his way to the stairs. He has been neutralized. What is the situation on the 5th floor? I found the room with Ida and the bomb in it. It looks like he did a seriously good job of cleaning up, so I'm not going to have much to work with. That is of no concern. I will join you momentarily. Do not alert him of your presence. Okay, what do you have in me? Izuku hung up. Walking up the stairs, he consolidated whatever knowledge he had about Ida and his quirk, and prepared a plan to deal with the final obstacle in the exercise. Standing next to the doorway, Uraraka waited for the arrival of her teammate so they could finish the exercise together. He was able to take down Bakugo pretty quickly compared to that. What have I been doing? Letting out a sigh? She paused a moment before taking a slight peek into the room to see what defenses Ida had prepared, only to see the villain practicing his monologue into the empty room. Foolish heroes, you may have defeated my comrade, but I will be the one reigning victorious in this battle. I will know. That doesn't sound villainous enough. Ahem. She just managed to stifle a giggle at her classmate's antics when she realized Izuku was standing in front of her. Surprised, she made eye contact with her partner, who acknowledged her existence by nodding at her before staring at the wall. A few seconds later, he turned to her. Here's the plan. Though he is fast, the pillars in the room mean he has to be careful regarding how much speed he uses and in which direction. We will engage him in combat together, and when the opportunity presents itself, I will sweep his legs. Once he's open, you will make physical contact and remove his gravity, thus neutralizing him. Do you understand? She flashed him a smile. Yup, let's win this, partner. A nod, and then she rounded the corner and entered the room. Noticing the intruder, his armored opponent turned to face her, taking a dramatic stance and pointing at the hero. So, a lone heroine wishes to come between this city and its destruction? Well, not as long as I draw breath. En garde, hero. As if we'd ever let something like that happen. Let's get him. Wait, Izuku? Checking her surroundings, she realized her teammate was nowhere to be found. Confused, Uraraka reacted a second late when Ida sped towards her, intending on landing the first strike. Eek! Rolling out of the way, she returned to her feet while trying to find out where Izuku had gone. Izuku, where are you? Suddenly abandoned, Uraraka had no choice but to attempt to take down Ida alone. A task she soon realized would be much harder than she first thought. Literally running circles around her, Ida taunted his would-be capturer. Ha! Witness your meager efforts fall flat against my superior speed. What will you do, hero? Will you surrender? Never. Raising her arms in a fighting stance, Uraraka prepared to attempt to intercept the speedster. Very well, then suffer the consequences. Mwahaha! Dashing from behind, Ida landed a side tackle from behind, throwing her a few feet into a wall and knocking the wind out of her. Hissing in pain, Uraraka cradled her bruised body and looked up to see the villain standing over her. Give up, hero. You are no match for my abilities. Surrender, and you may. The sound of a window breaking interrupted his speech. Looking towards the source of the disturbance, Uraraka could see Izuku had crashed through the window and landed with a roll before dashing to make contact with the bomb. Ace, if I'd let you. Suddenly seconds away from losing, Ida pushed his engines to the limits to intercept the hero before he could win the exercise. Izuku reached out for the bomb, just as Ida was about to catch him. Uraraka's eyes widened. Izuku's not going to make it. Ida is going to reach him first. But right as Ida's shoulder was about to make contact, Izuku ducked to the ground to dodge the speedster's tackle and grabbed him by the shoulder. Pivoting on his feet to spin his target around, Izuku used his opponent's momentum to bring his center of gravity to the ground before twisting his wrist behind his back and securing him in a hold. Grunting with pain, Ida attempted to wiggle out of the grapple, but soon found that the more he struggled, the tighter Izuku would twist his wrist. Any further, and it would cause serious damage. He had lost. Damn you heroes! Placing Ida's hands behind his back, Izuku tied them together with the capture tape to secure the villain and finish the exercise. Ida Tenya has been captured. The hero team wins. With that, the exercise had come to an end. 2 out of the 3 students let out a sigh of exhaustion, while the last simply used one of his hands to brush the glass off of his kimono. After catching her breath, Uraraka walked up to Izuku. So what actually happened back there? He removed his grip on Ida and turned to face her. I climbed out and circled around on the outside of the building to enter the room from the northern window, so I could get close to the bomb unseen. Then, once Ida noticed my proximity to the bomb, he panicked and ran straight at me at full speed, allowing me to predict his movements and grapple him into a wrist lock. Your role was that of a distraction, which you played well. A masterfully well-executed plan. Truly, you continue to impress me, Midoriya. Ida added from below. Uraraka frowned. Why didn't you just tell me that was the plan from the start? I thought it unlikely you would agree to play the part of bait against a more combat-focused opponent if you knew you would be alone. Then maybe you should have respected that? Look, just don't do something like that again. We're supposed to be teammates, and teammates have to be honest with each other, right? Izuku's expression remained unreadable. Very well. When necessary, I will communicate with you more truthfully. She was about to start scolding him again when she suddenly heard the sound of shuffling feet come from behind. Oh, Bakugo must have gotten out of his restraints. He might be a little annoyed about losing the exercise, so I'll hold back on the teasing for now. She turned around with a smile on her face, hoping to compliment her opponent on the well-fought battle. But her smile disappeared upon seeing the expression on Bakugo's face. Man, that match was crazy, Ashido exclaimed. Such manliness on display, it almost made me want to jump into the fight myself. Kirishima couldn't help but agree with his middle school friend. All Might shared the sentiment. It was a little rocky at the beginning, but the heroes used a strategy befitting of their role. Now if only young Midoriya could learn better communication skills. He shrugged. Something to work on in the future. He spoke into the intercom. All right, students, well done. Please return to the observation room for an evaluation of the exercise. Be sure to. All Might. He turned around. Yes, young Gyro? She nervously pointed to one of the screens, which showed the room the bomb inhabited. In it, Midoriya and Uraraka were discussing something over the restrained form of Ida. However, upon closer inspection, All Might could see the injured form of Bakugo slowly limping into the room, with the charred remains of the capture tape around one of his arms. That's strange. You should have heard my message. Young Bakugo, the match is over. Please return to the observation room in a timely manner. He didn't respond. Young Bakugo? The beaten hero finally managed to raise his head to look at Izuku. You little fucker, he managed to get out. Noticing her classmate, Uraraka turned around to see his bruised and beaten form. Bakugo-kun, are you okay? Why, you look pretty bad. Maybe we should take you to the... Shut up. Uraraka flinched. Like hell, I'm letting a villain get one over me. Raising one of his gauntlets, he aimed it at the trio. Realizing what he was about to do, All Might tried to put a stop to it. Stop, young Bakugo. If that attack lands, it could kill. That's the goddamn plan. The last thing the group could make out was the maniacal glee on Bakugo's face, contrasting with Uraraka's expression of abject terror. A second later, there was a single frame of bright light, and then the screens went dark. Finally, coughing, bruised, and bleeding, Bakugo couldn't stop the smile spreading across his face. And why would he? At long last, the villain that had been haunting him for 15 years was dead. So what if those two extras got caught in the blast? If they were weak enough to die from that, then they wouldn't have made it long as heroes anyway. They didn't matter. As long as that monster was dead, he could. Impressive. Bakugo's heart stopped. What? No way, he's still alive. He ate one of my blasts at full power. Fuck, even All Might would have flinched from that. As the smoke at his peripheral vision cleared, the first thing Bakugo could make out was the slumped figure of Uraraka leaning against an indent in the wall. Her helmet was cracked, and he could see blood trailing down her forehead, leading a trail down to her chin. He couldn't tell if she was breathing. Then he saw a figure in the smoke standing just a few feet in front of him. At first, thinking it was Izuku, Bakugo prepared to fire off another blast, but stopped upon seeing his outline. His head was slumped over, feet barely touching the ground, and his arms were tied behind his back. Then Bakugo saw heavy armor darkened with soot, and realized he was looking at the form of his unconscious teammate. Your sweat fuels your explosions, and since your sweat glands become more active the longer a fight goes on, you hold an inherent advantage over opponents in battles of attrition. Over time, those gauntlets of yours store excess nitroglycerin, and when the time comes, you can release a single colossal explosion to decimate your enemies. A hand lowered the unconscious hero's body to reveal 6 yellow irises. Truly, a trump card fitting of your temperament, capable of incapacitating powerful foes with a single attack. Ida finally dropped to the floor, revealing the unscathed figure of Izuku. A shame, then, that you wasted it on an ally. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Izuku, because he was waiting for his opponent to give his response, and Bakugo, because he was incapable of forming one. What the hell? He used the extra as a human shield? Is he crazy? Even with that armor, if he took the full impact of my blast, he could actually die. Does Deku not care? Does he want him to die? Does he want to frame me? Is that his game? Does he? What's wrong? His breathing hitched. Why do you not approach? Are you afraid? Afraid? Hell no, I'm not afraid. I'm 2M, just catching my breath. Just wait. In a few more seconds I'll beat you so. Very well, then I'll come to you. His breathing stopped altogether. What? I must have heard him wrong. There's no way he wouldn't give me at least a few seconds to. Izuku was walking towards him. 14 steps away. Okay, no big deal. I've still got a few seconds to get my breathing under control, form a counterattack, and then 12 steps away. Why is he walking so goddamn fast? All right, as soon as he gets in range, I'll set off a blast aimed at the floor so I can. 10 steps away. No, no, no. That won't work. He's too fucking quick. Okay, I'll have to use something that he can't react to, something that. 8 steps away. Wait, that's it. My other gauntlet's still full of my sweat. I just have to aim it at him and pull the trigger. He's too far away from the extra to use him as a shield guy. 6 steps away. Why won't my body fucking move? Just raise your arm, dumbass. He's getting closer. Just pull the fucking trigger and. 4 steps away. FUCKINGMOVEYUSTUPID FUCKINGIDIOTHESRIGHDTTHEREHES GONNA KILLYOUHES GONNASLSE IN YOUINHELF GONNA. 2 steps away. STOPHIMDOSOTHNGHES RIGTTHIS YUHES L YUDOSNGDO. Izuku walked past him and left the room. Walking down the stairs, Izuku pondered on the effectiveness of the training exercise. For the hundreds of years he was a demon, he never partook in team exercises as it simply wasn't in a demon's nature. The last time he could remember working together with someone else was during his time as a demon slayer. Revisiting the concept after so long was nostalgic in a sense, making him remember when he was weak enough to have to rely on others. Well, to a certain degree that was true for the present, but he was still surprised at how well it had gone. Overall, I think the exercise was a success. Though unfortunately, that's not saying much in a match against children. It's clear that using the transparent world presents a massive advantage in urban environments, so it's likely going to be a massive asset in future hero work. Furthermore, my combat skills are likely more than enough to deal with any threats I come across. Even against Bakugo, the use of my sword wasn't even necessary to incapacitate him, although I'm interested in seeing how superior my skills are to an actual pro. Izuku reached the 3rd floor. Speaking of Bakugo, his body has become far more refined than the last time I examined it. Somehow, despite his temperament, he has great discipline. That's not even mentioning his reflexes, which were far superior to those belonging to that Ida, I believe his name was. It's clear that Bakugo holds much promise as a successor, especially with that attack at the end. Reaching the ground floor, he made his way to the exit. Using such a large-scale blast would have been an effective strategy if not for the convenient shield lying right beside me. Thinking of the fallen hero, he thanked whatever fool designed heavy armor for a combatant who specialized in agility. My defense also wouldn't have succeeded if I was still wearing my straw sandals. They never would have survived against the force of that explosion. Never before have I been this happy for compromising on my desires. A cloud of dust in the distance interrupted his musings. Upon closer inspection, Izuku could make out the speeding figure of All Might quickly closing in. Stopping a few feet in front of him, he held a look of panic on his face that was uncharacteristically frantic. Young Midoriya, are you all right? The cameras were destroyed by the blast. What's the current situation? Is anyone hurt? Izuku blinked. Yes, now that I think of it, those 2 students were heavily injured by Bakugo's final attack. Though it would be unwise of me to tell the truth of what happened, I am distrusted enough as is. The situation is dire, All Might. Though I was luckily able to escape serious harm, Ida and Uraraka were caught in Bakugo's blast and are currently unconscious. They require immediate medical treatment. All Might's face paled. With a quiet nod, he sped into the building. Izuku could hear the hero fiddle with his radio behind him, before saying something about an emergency in a panicked voice. I wonder if that was convincing enough of a performance. Izuku made his way to rejoin the rest of his classmates. My first day. All Might raced up the stairs to reach his injured students. How did I screw up this badly on my first day? It was supposed to be a simple battle trial. Introduce the students to the basics of combat while interjecting some classic All Might one-liners, and then make his escape before his time ran out. It should have been easy. Instead, the very first match ended with an explosion powerful enough to destroy all of the cameras in the building with a shockwave that was felt from the observation room. No response came from students through the comms, so he had decided to go to the site himself to ensure their safety. Seeing young Midoriya leave the building with a little more than dust on his costume was comforting. What wasn't comforting was hearing him say that 2 of the students were critically injured and in dire need of medical treatment. Immediately classifying the situation as an emergency, he radioed for help from other teachers to begin rescue operations before rushing into the building himself. I should have stopped the match sooner. I shouldn't have started off first years with battle. I should have seen the signs of Bakugo's temper. I should have been better. Reaching the 5th floor, he entered a scene of pure anguish. First, he saw Bakugo, standing a few steps away from the entryway. At first, All Might thought he was staring in horror at the sight before him, but upon closer inspection, he could see that his eyes were blank, and he was hyperventilating. Further scanning the room, his heart sank as he saw the collapsed figure of Ida. He was still in his armor, though that wasn't easily apparent from the state of it. Soot, dirt, and dust littered its once pristine surface, marring its chrome color down to a dim gray. All Might could smell the distinct odor of burnt flesh off of him and nearly gagged. Before he could make the steps necessary to reach his crippled form, his eyes reached the final student injured by his own incompetence. Uraraka, the bright-eyed, blushing girl who minutes prior had been doing her best in the first class of foundational heroics, lay slumped against an indent in the wall with a trail of blood down her face dripping into a pool on the floor. She wasn't moving. Young Uraraka. Rushing to her side, All Might realized her breathing was erratic and she was non-responsive to his presence. Possible signs of a traumatic brain injury. He was about to pick her up and carry her to the medbots downstairs when he heard a terrified gasp come from behind. Turning around, he saw the shocked expression on Midnight's face. What the hell happened here? Staring at the dust and destruction, it was clear she could not contemplate a reasonable explanation. And he did not have one to give her. Opening the doors to the observation room, Izuku was suddenly rushed by a mob of his classmates, all wearing concerned looks on their faces. Holy crap, Midoriya, what happened back there? Are you okay? Where is everyone else? Izuku blinked, waiting for the noise to die down. Looking at their faces, he couldn't help but wonder why they were so affected by a single incident. In his time as a demon slayer, the injury or death of a comrade was more common than not. Why are all of them so concerned? We've known each other for all of a week, and now they act like we've been acquainted all of our lives? Times of peace really do wonders to soften humans. He cleared his throat, and the crowd silenced. There was an unfortunate incident after the battle trial had ended. At some point during the exercise, Bakugo escaped the constraints I had placed on him and made his way to the 5th floor. After All Might had declared the heroes as the winners, he released a massive explosion directed at Ida, Uraraka, and me. A few students gasped. I was able to escape the blast radius, but Ida and Uraraka were not as fortunate. When I last saw them, they had heavy injuries and were unresponsive. I do not know their current condition. The class went into an uproar, expressing concern and shouting questions. How bad were they hurt? Do the other teachers know? Kirishima's voice raised above the others. Why would Bakugo do that? I know he said something about a villain, but... Izuku sighed and looked down. Bakugo's temper has always been a problem. It's possible he was retaliating as a result of the methods I employed. Before the class could begin another round of questions, they were interrupted by the sound of the observation room doors slamming open. All of the students turned to see Aizawa, his mannerisms completely different from the careless and sleepy image he had given the days before. After scanning the room and realizing that a few students were missing, he marched forward to take a look at the observation room screens, only to see nothing but static. Why are the cameras out? He demanded. The cameras were destroyed in the blast. We didn't see anything after Bakugo Siro's voice trailed off. After Bakugo what? Aizawa's piercing red eyes bore holes through the plain-faced student, who winced at the increased pressure. After Bakugo released a massive explosion, in which he destroyed the cameras as well as injured Ida and Uraraka. Izuku answered. Aizawa turned his head towards the voice's source. And how do you know this? I was present when the altercation occurred, although I was able to escape serious injury. The same could not be said of my cohorts. The hero winced before taking a deep breath and turning to the rest of the students. All right, listen up. Except for Midoriya, all of you are to change back to your uniforms and go home. Class dismissed. Kaminari raised his hand. But what about the rest of the foundational? Red Eyes met his. I said, class, dismissed. No one else objected. What a goddamn mess. When he had first heard the emergency sound at ground beta, he had thought it was a false alarm. It was the first day of foundational heroics after all. How badly could All Might possibly screw it up? Apparently cataclysmically. A building nearly destroyed, one student covered in first and second-degree burns, one with severe head trauma, one in a near catatonic state, and one without a scratch. The last one was likely despite All Might's best efforts. How the hell did this happen? Leading Midoriya to his office, Aizawa couldn't help but blame himself for not monitoring the exercise despite knowing All Might was a novice teacher. From the beginning, he was against letting him teach at UA, even more so after finding out how fragile a state he was really in. If things were so dire for the number one hero, wouldn't he have better things to do than putz around at a school for heroes in training? Regardless, he was outvoted, and All Might was welcomed to the faculty. Without a teaching license, or experience, or talent, he was welcomed all the same. And Aizawa couldn't regret it more. Reaching his office door, he motioned for Izuku to enter, who sat on the chair in front of his desk. Finally sitting down, Aizawa stared at his student before asking him a simple question. What happened? Midoriya nodded. The battle trial had just ended. Wait, the battle trial? What do you mean the battle trial? Aizawa interrupted. All Might's foundational heroics class consisted of us pairing into teams and engaging each other in combat in a building. Were you unaware of the lesson plan? He pinched the bridge of his nose and sighed. Why, in the name of everything that is sacred, would All Might start the students off with combat? Why didn't he at least start with safety guidelines, like I told him to? Never mind, continue. Right, the battle trial had just ended, and Uraraka and I had subjugated both Ida and Bakugo. Uraraka and I discussed my tactics during the exercise, when Bakugo made his presence known at the doorway. A pause. He said something about losing to a villain, and then aimed one of his gauntlets at me. Knowing what his explosions were capable of, I leaped out of his range, but Ida and Uraraka were not as fortunate. They were caught in the blast and received heavy injuries. When the dust cleared, I saw Bakugo standing as though he were in a trance, so I left the building to get help. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. Why was Bakugo in a trance? Was he under the influence of a quirk? Midoriya shook his head. I do not believe that to be the case. It's possible when he saw the extent of the damage he had wrought, his conscience caught up with him. Nevertheless, he was no longer a threat at the time and left him for whichever teacher I found first. What happened to your comms? My communications device was destroyed by the shockwave, as were the cameras in the room. As such, I doubt anyone in the observation room was able to see what happened. Aizawa sighed. I'll have to review the footage to see the moments leading up to the explosion. What could make Bakugo so enraged he'd assault his own classmates after an exercise? He looked up. You mentioned Bakugo saying something about losing to a villain. Could you expand on that? A nod. Earlier in the exercise, Bakugo engaged me while I was exploring the first floor. Hearing his approach, I set a lure consisting of audio on my phone playing in the hallway. He fell for it, and I capitalized, though now I fear he saw that as a villainous tactic. Midoriya, look at me. Aizawa inched forward. There is nothing villainous about using tactics that do not consist of blindly rushing into combat. In fact, I discourage reckless behavior like that because it makes it more likely to run into a trap, something I think Bakugo learned. A nod. I see. While that may be enough to annoy someone, it sure as hell doesn't explain his complete overreaction at the end of the exercise. Was there anything else that happened that could explain Bakuga's reaction? Midoriya looked away. Bakugo and I have always had a strained relationship. Though we've known each other since we were kids, he has always been convinced that I'm a villain. I believe my appearance may have played a role in that. Children can be cruel. Aizawa knew this well. He thought back on how his quirk used to be viewed as villainous, how kids used to be terrified of his ability to remove their individuality with just a glance. Midoriya, you are not responsible for anything that happened today. Do you understand? He met his eyes. Oh, I'm well aware. His actions are his own, and I can't be held accountable for today's injuries. It's just a shame he can't move past his own preconceived notions. Midoriya looked towards the window. After all, he has the potential to be a great hero. All right, that response was a bit strange. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. Something to be noted for the future. All right, head on home. Let the adults handle the result of this mess and get some rest. He watched as Midoriya nodded, got up, and calmly left the room. A few seconds later, Aizawa relaxed and leaned back in his chair before pulling a jelly packet from his pocket and sipping it. The kid's definitely hiding something. Aizawa had interviewed students for almost every incident possible. Bullying? Dozens of times. Witness to a crime? Even more. And every student had tells to let him know if they were telling the truth or not. But Midoriya? He didn't show any emotion, let alone any tells. The entire time that he recounted the events that led to the horrific injuries of his classmates, his expressions didn't change once. That's not how a normal teenager acts. Sighing, he took another sip of his jelly packet. Every time I meet him, I get more questions than answers. What is his actual quirk? Why is he hiding it? His father's apparently out of the picture, and his mother seems normal, so where did he learn to use a sword? And one thing about the exercise definitely perplexes me. How did he escape the blast radius of Bakuga's explosion? He said he leaped out of the way, but even with his speed I doubt he would have gotten out completely unscathed. Looking at his schedule, he realized the meeting he'd been dreading was going to start soon. Finishing his jelly packet and throwing it in the trash, he prepared to make the trek across the campus. I'll have to ask Mizu about what he thinks. Exiting the room, Aizawa made his way to the principal's office as his mood worsened at the prospect of his next task. And now, to deal with the biggest idiot of them all. Sitting in the principal's office with his eyes to the floor, Yagi Tashinori shriveled under the furious stares of Nizu, Aizawa, and Recovery Girl. What the hell is wrong with you, Yagi? Aizawa's piercing red eyes stared holes into his head. Now let me just say that I'm aware of the severity. Recovery Girl cut in. Aware? You're aware. No, clearly. You have no idea how severe the situation is, so allow me to enlighten you. Ida has first and second-degree burns on over 70% of the front of his body. Thank the gods he's still unconscious. Otherwise, we'd be hearing his screams of pain all across the campus. And Uraraka? After the blast, the force from the impact alone was enough to crack her skull. If the building hadn't been constructed from Cementas's impact-absorbing cement, she would have died instantly. Do you understand that? Tashinori's face paled. How are they now? She sighed. Thanks to his armor, Ida's damage besides the burns was minimal. He'll be fine so long as he gets enough rest. As for Uraraka, I was able to relieve the pressure in her skull. She's stable for now, but we won't know the extent of the damage until after she wakes up. Tashinori remained silent. Aizawa's glare hardened. Your first day, and UA has already had its single worst student-related injury in 15 years. Clearly, you're incapable of acting like a responsible adult when it comes to your students. Speaking of whom, what were you thinking when you left them completely alone in the observation room? Did you think it was okay to leave them unsupervised? When I walked in there, Midoriya was informing them of the injuries their classmates had sustained. Of course you wouldn't bother to learn this, but they haven't taken the class associated with breaking news like that. The situation necessitated that I prioritize the injured students. Then you should have told someone that, Yagi. You should have notified another teacher that Class 1A needed supervision because you were too busy cleaning up your own mess instead of hoping someone else found them before they found out their classmates had nearly died. Tashinori hung his head in shame. Nizu clapped his paws together. Now, moving on to more productive matters. What have we determined to be the cause of this incident? I can answer that. Aizawa leaned back in his seat to try to calm down. Bakugo, using a support item that never should have been approved, released a concentrated explosion directed towards Midoriya, Ida, and Uraraka. The weapon functioned by storing Bakugo's excess sweat until he manually detonates it. As for why he did it, according to Midoriya, Bakugo held issue with his conduct during the match, calling him a villain. Apparently, they had history before they were enrolled here, though it's not entirely clear how much that factors in. Nizu smiled. You can leave that to me. I'll be having a fruitful discussion with him later today, where I can better understand his reasoning behind the attempted murders of his classmates. Tashinori raised his head enough to make eye contact with the furry principal. What is going to happen to young Bakugo? He sighed. Unfortunately, since those gauntlets of his never should have received clearance in the first place, any serious action will likely end up backfiring against us. I'll have a conversation with him, and hopefully we can sweep this incident under the rug. So long as no similar incidents occur, he may stay in the hero course. All Might breathed a sigh of relief. Nizu's beady eyes sharpened. You, on the other hand, are forbidden from ever teaching heroics classes alone. All of your lesson plans are going to be approved by either myself or Aizawa in the future, and any actions that transgress those two conditions will lead to your immediate termination. I will not risk the safety of my students in order to advance your personal agenda. Are we clear? A solemn nod. Crystal. Arriving at his destination, Bakugo knocked on the principal's door. Come in. A voice from within called. Opening the door, he saw one seat available to him. Finding his place in it, he faced the principal sitting in his heightened chair, wearing the same smile he always does. Creepy little rat. Would you like some tea? He offered. No. Nodding, he poured himself a cup before taking a sip. So Bakugo. He made eye contact. Why do you think you are here? Bakugo scoffed. He knew why he was there. Those two extras didn't get out of the way in time, and now his ass was in the hot seat. How is it his fault that two weaklings didn't have what it took to be heroes? It's all Deku's fault. If he wasn't such a coward, I would have laid him out in 10 seconds flat. Instead, he has to resort to stupid tricks to get a leg up on me. Bakugo grinded his teeth. Because I injured my classmates. That is putting it quite lightly. The clink of the teacup seemed to punctuate his point. Are you aware of the extent of their injuries? No. Would you like to know? A scoff. Sure, why not? Well, due to your explosion, Uraraka suffered blunt force trauma to the back of her skull. As a result, her temporal bone was broken, sending fragments into the occipital lobe of her brain. After which, a brain bleed led to her having a complex partial seizure in the infirmary. Bakugo paled. We were able to stabilize her and repair the damage to her skull, but we won't know if her faculties are affected until after she wakes up. As for Ida, the burns all over his body. That one's on fucking Deku, not me. Bakugo snarled, trying to control his nerves. Nizu tilted his head. If you're referring to Midoriya, I find that hard to believe. I seem to remember you releasing an explosion, not him. Sure, but if Deku didn't use that extra as a human shield, he never would have gotten blasted as bad as he did. Are you saying Midoriya intentionally put Ida in harm's way in order to save himself? That's quite a heavy accusation. It's not a goddamn accusation. It's true. He's a fucking villain, he always Bakugo. Nizu narrowed his eyes. You are new here at UA, so allow me to clarify something. It is not a student's choice to decide who is and who is not a villain. You do not have the right to be judge, jury, and executioner when it comes to crimes and the individuals who commit them. If you have a suspicion regarding a fellow student, you bring it to the attention of a teacher and then let them handle it. Do you understand? No, because none of you useless fucks believe me. You're just going to let him walk around. Pretend to be a hero. Look at me with those. Bakugo grit his teeth. Yes, sir. Now with that out of the way, we can move on to your punishment. He stood out of his seat with enough force to knock it to the ground. Punishment? Why the hell am I getting punished? Why Bakugo? Obviously because had it not been for our part in this mess, you would be going to prison for attempted murder. Bakugo froze. Those gauntlets of yours should never have been approved, and while that does make us culpable for a part of the blame, that does not absolve you of your behavior. As such, You are now officially on probation. You are not allowed to use any form of support equipment during your heroics classes. You are not allowed to act aggressively towards anyone, including Midoriya, and if you do anything that Aizawa or I would deem out of line during this period, I will not hesitate to transfer you to general education. He smiled. Am I clear? God damn it. Bakugo clenched his fists. Why is this happening to me? Why am I getting punished and Deku's getting off scot-free? It's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair. Yes, sir. A nod. Good man. Now, go on your way. Bakugo robotically made his way to the door. Right as he grabbed onto the handle, he paused and turned around to face the principal. One day, you're going to see that villain for the monster he is. And when you do, you'll wish you hadn't stopped me. With that, he slammed the door shut behind him. Nizu stared at the slightly burnt handle of the door before pouring himself another cup of tea and taking a deep breath. A human shield, he said to himself. Well, that explains why Ida's wounds are on the front of his body when the last frame the camera recorded him being on his stomach. Nizu sighed. He knew that logically, it would be difficult to bring his suspicions against Midoriya to the table without more solid evidence. After all, accusing a heroic student of a villainous act like that held serious repercussions regardless of the outcome. If the evidence ended up being insufficient or if Midoriya is innocent, then the career of a hero hopeful would be over before it even began. If he was feeling especially unforgiving, he could sue the school for emotional damages and possibly win. If Midoriya is guilty, then it still wouldn't be enough to justify expulsion or even just a transfer and create resentment in a student far more capable than he lets on. Both outcomes are unfavorable. It seems for now I have no choice but to let sleeping dogs lie, at least until my investigation bears fruit. Nizu stared out of his window towards the training grounds. Just who are you, Midoriya Izuku? After receiving the dressing down of his life, Toshinori walked through the halls of UA with hunched shoulders and a guilty conscience. I completely failed my students today, allowing the exercise to reach that level of violence, missing the signs of Bakugo's breakdown, and worst of all, the sound of Uraraka's scream echoed in his head. I really am losing my touch. It took me far too long to reach the scene. Any longer, and the bleeding in Uraraka's skull could have led to permanent brain damage. I thought I had more energy to work with, but pushing myself to that degree took so much more out of me than I expected. He looked down at his shaking hands. I'm running out of time. I had hoped I could spend more time looking for the right successor, but that no longer seems to be an option. With a heavy heart, he pulled out his cell phone and dialed the number he had been avoiding for months. After a single ring, someone picked up. Hello? Nightai. Yes, it's been a while. Listen, I've put a lot of thought into it, and I want to meet that intern you've been talking about.